My very good friend Felicia got married in December of last year. I was one of her bridesmaids, and we had a bachelorette weekend at Daytona Beach, Florida, about a month before the wedding. There were 8 of us in total. Myself, Felicia, Andrea, Lorena, Julia, Renee, Caitlin, and Brittany. We rented a house off of Airbnb that was less than a mile away from the beach. The price that we got it for was almost too good to be true. When we got there, the place wasn't what we were expecting. That's not to say it was a complete dump. It did have a charm to it, but there was just something off about it. For one, it had a basement, which is incredibly rare to find in Florida. Down in the basement, there were 2 rooms connected by an archway. There also appeared to be several rushed renovations done throughout the home. Something that struck me as odd was that there was a space under the staircase that was fenced off. It was very bizarre to be staring at a literal chain link fence inside of a basement in Florida, but we figured it had something to do with the recent renovations and moved along. So the first day we spent shopping around town. That evening we went out for dinner, then went bar hopping afterwards. We didn't get back until around 1 a.m. We had all drank a considerable amount that night, so we didn't stay up and hang out. We just decided to call it a night and get ready for bed. Felicia and I slept in the same bed in the first section of the basement. Through the archway is where Andrea and Lorena slept. They pushed 2 twin beds together. Everyone else slept upstairs. So about 2 hours after everyone fell asleep, I randomly woke up and turned to my side, and I see the silhouette of someone moving silently past the bed towards the archway, where Lorena and Andrea were sleeping. The only thing that was providing any kind of light was from a streetlight outside coming through a small window, so I couldn't make out many details, but I could clearly see that whoever this person was wearing a baseball cap. Now, I had made the entire bridal party caps on my Cricut machine and handed them out to everyone when we first got there. So my first thought was that either Lorena or Andrea had gotten up to use the restroom, but then I thought about how strange it was that they would be wearing one of the caps I made them. Without a sound, the figure disappeared through the archway, and shortly after, I saw these brief flashes of light coming from the other room. It was almost as if someone was taking pictures. I began to internally freak out. I was thinking that someone was down there with us and was taking pictures of Andrea and Lorena while they slept. Felicia is a light sleeper, so I squeezed her hand to wake her up. As soon as her eyes opened, I whispered to her that I thought someone was in the house and that there were flashes coming from the other room. Felicia was the closest to the archway, so she got up and grabbed her phone off the dresser, which was on the far side of the basement, and peered into the other room with her cell phone. She climbed back into bed and told me that there was nobody there and that Andrea and Lorena were fast asleep. I was confused. I swear that I saw someone wearing a baseball cap walk into that room. I thought that maybe since I was in a new place, I might have been just seeing things and was overreacting. I eventually fell back asleep, and I tried to put the strange incident out of my mind and enjoy the rest of the trip. The next day we spent on the beach, and even went axe throwing later on. We got back in at around 10 p.m. We popped in a movie and chilled out for the rest of that night. We all fell asleep around midnight. About an hour after I fell asleep next to Felicia in the basement, we were all woken up by a loud scream coming from the next room. We then heard Lorena shouting, "Are you guys fucking with me?" We got up and went into the room to see what was going on. We found out that Lorena had not been sleeping and was just lying in her bed listening to her headphones. She turns over and sees a man wearing jeans and a jacket, and of course, a baseball cap. He was apparently standing next to her bed, facing the wall, and was smiling. That's when she closed her eyes tight, and when she looked again, the man was gone. And that's when she started screaming. Everyone who was sleeping in the basement started to gather their things, and it was decided that we would all sleep upstairs. However, with all of us being thoroughly freaked out and wide awake and had to leave early the next day anyways, we decided just to get the hell out of there, and I drove the 2.5 hours back to my place that night. Later on, Felicia decided to look up the history of the house we stayed in. What was odd is that since its construction in the 1920s, it has changed owners several times over the years. Nobody ever lived there for more than 5 years at most. Felicia did inform the owner of the house what happened, but the owner just brushed it off, saying that they never heard of anyone having that kind of experience there before. But strangely, when we tried to look up the house to see if it was still available, the listing was completely gone from the website. If it had just been me who saw the man in the baseball cap, I might have been able to dismiss this whole thing. But Lorena saw him as well, and he seemed to vanish into thin air after he appeared. I'm convinced that we all experienced something paranormal at that house.
It all started this past November. I had a major job interview in Toronto at a graphic design firm. They needed me in the city for a few days, as there were 2 training sessions I had to attend along with this interview. Because I live in Niagara, about a 2-hour drive away, I decided that it would just be wise to just stay at a hotel so I wouldn't have to drive back and forth every day. About a week before the interview, I was at my boyfriend's house looking online for relatively cheap hotels that were close to the graphic design firm. He brought up that I should go on a website called Airbnb, which is an online trusted marketplace where guests can book spaces from hosts like apartments or houses. I ended up finding a woman who was going on vacation for about a week during the exact time I was supposed to be in Toronto. She was renting out her apartment for $50 a night, which I thought was very generous. I ended up giving her a call and arranged the time I would be coming over. The apartment building was very run down. The windows looked like they hadn't been cleaned in years, and the brick walls were crumbling and discolored. I took a deep breath and considered telling the woman that my interview was canceled so that I could find somewhere else to stay. But $50 a night seems so perfect compared to hundreds of dollars a night at a hotel. I decided that I would at least check out the room before making the judgment. I knocked on the old wooden door with the number 14 painted in gold and waited a few moments before the woman swung it open and greeted me with a smile. She was a lot younger than I expected, maybe in her late 20s. Her voice sounded so tired and ragged on the phone. I had thought she was at least going to be 50. Her blonde hair was tied in a messy bun that paired quite perfectly with her blue tracksuit, with a small hole in the shoulder. "You made it!" she exclaimed. Come in, come in." She gestured into the room, which I am relieved to say was very clean and welcoming. It was definitely one of those don't judge a book by its cover moments. I've always hated that saying, by the way. Heard it too often as a kid. She gave me the quickest tour of an apartment that I had ever received, briefly pointing to the kitchen, bedroom, bathroom, and hallway closet. It was a small space, but perfect for me. Her place was filled with vintage collectibles, lace, elaborate curtains, old candle holders. I was still examining my surroundings when she erupted with, "So you're all set then? I'm gonna go." I barely had any time to speak with her. She seemed to be in a huge rush. "Wait," I said, trying to catch up to her as she made her way out the door carrying a large backpack. "Is there anything I should know?" She shook her head slowly, locking eyes with me for a few moments too long. Without speaking, she left. I made myself comfortable for a little while, unpacking and fixing myself a quick snack in the kitchen. I had about 45 minutes before I had to leave for my interview. I'll skip past the details of the interview because they aren't even nearly as important as the occurrence that happened afterward. It was very late when I got back. The apartment building was pitch black except for a small light at the top of the staircase that flickered every few seconds. I used the light from my phone to make my way up the stairs to my apartment. 14. I wondered who else was living in the building. I hadn't seen anyone since I arrived. It was too quiet. It took me a few moments to find the light switch on the wall when I entered the room. From the doorway, I was able to see into the bedroom. The first thing I noticed was that a few of my clothes were sprawled over the floor. I quickly kicked off my shoes and approached the mess. I came to the conclusion that I must have been in a rush when I was getting ready for the interview and forgot to clean up. I was tired, so I had a quick shower and jumped into bed. The mattress wasn't very comfortable, but I was so exhausted that I drifted right into sleep. A loud shuffling somewhere in the apartment woke me up with a startle. I sat up and squinted my eyes to try to see through the darkness. Just before I was able to lay back down to sleep, thinking it was one of my neighbors in their apartment, I saw a shape. At first I thought it was one of the woman's elaborate curtains playing tricks on my eyes in the dark. Then it moved, just ever so slightly. The black shape was tall and lanky. It almost resembled a man, but it was just too hard to see. I inched my arm for the light switch, my heart pounding out of my chest. Just before the light flickered on, the figure fell on all floors and crawled inhumanly out of sight. What the fuck? I couldn't help but whisper. With the light now on, I got up and slowly made my way around the apartment trying to find out what I just saw. But there was nothing. Absolutely nothing. Without anything else I could do, I went back to bed. There must have been a logical explanation for what had happened. It was all in my head. In the morning I called the woman. I must have sounded so strange when I asked her if she had anyone else that lived with her, that maybe could come into the room last night, not expecting me to be there. She paused for a while and then answered with no, and insisted she was busy and had to go. I proceeded with my day, going to my first training session. When I came back that night, I felt extra cautious. I brought a knife with me to bed, placing it under my pillow. I was woken up once again about 2 a.m. This time, the figure was much closer than it was the previous night. I gasped, so filled with fright that I couldn't move or scream. The figure was so skinny. Through the shadows, I could almost make out the rib cage underneath its skin. It was naked. Its face lingered in the dark except for 2 dark circles, where his eyes must have been. I tried to scream once again, but it came out like a loud choke. Whatever this was, it reached its finger up to its mouth with a soft shh. The sound was so haunting, it sent a shiver down my neck. Don't tell. I must have been in such a shock that I passed out, because when I woke up, it was morning. All I could do was cry. I was so confused. I had never been more scared in my life. It couldn't be real. I was brought up my whole life not to believe in such things. But what if it was actually a disfigured man? Or what if it was something I only heard of in nightmares? I shook my head to rid the craziness. I was probably having nightmares because of all the stress. I left for my second training session. When I came back to the apartment around 10 p.m., I couldn't help but linger outside the door. I stared at the large number 14 painted on the door, trying to find the courage to lift my key out of my pocket, to open it. I told myself that all I had to do was last one more night, and I'd be gone in the morning. I decided to sleep on the couch in the front room this time. This way I was even closer to the front door, so I could hear it opening if this thing decided to greet me again. It took me a long time to fall asleep. I watched 12 a.m., 1 a.m., 2 a.m., and 3 a.m. go by on the clock. I must have dozed off because I woke up from a cold breeze. It was 3:47. I sat up on the couch to see that the window was open, making the curtains sway in the winds. As I got up to go close it, ready to call the police, I heard the soft shh behind me. I closed my eyes and started to cry. Shh. It got louder and louder. I slowly turned around to face this creature. It was crouched by the TV just a few feet away from me. It didn't move. It just kept its finger up to its lips. I feared that if I reached for my phone to call the cops, it would come straight for me. "Please," I whispered. It was all I could manage to get out. "Shh. Don't tell," it said. And the scariest thing since the first time I had seen this thing was that it started to smile. It was smiling. Although it was dark, I could see the shadowed smile. It hasn't left my mind in all the months that have passed. I remained completely still, and it stayed there for a few more minutes before it crawled back past the couch and onto the windowsill, looking at me one more time before jumping out. I jolted for my phone and called my boyfriend. I told him everything. I was surprised he even understood me because I was such a mess. Should I call the police?" I asked frantically. "The police won't believe what you were saying. It's hard for me to even comprehend. I think you need to come home. You sound sleep deprived, and I think it's making you see things." My heart sunk. Even my own boyfriend didn't believe me. "It smiled at me," I whispered. I heard him sigh before saying goodnight and hanging up the phone. I curled myself into a ball into the couch and attempted to sleep, but I didn't. How could I after that? As soon as the sun came up, I packed my things and bolted for the door. I tried calling my boyfriend 6 times to tell him I was on my way home. No answer. As I opened the door, I bumped right into the woman. She was back early. I didn't even know what to tell her when she asked how my stay was. Look, I have to go. My boyfriend isn't answering his phone and I need to get home. I pushed her aside without thinking, just wanting to get to my car. Why isn't he answering? She asked with concern in her voice. I wasn't sure why she cared. I shrugged and continued down the stairs. I could see my car through the window on the bottom floor. I was so close to escaping. Did you tell? I heard her say softly from a room. You told, didn't you?
It was late October in Sofia, Bulgaria. That year, Halloween fell on a Saturday, and my friend Minchko was throwing a massive shindig at his parents' apartment. Now this guy was rich by Bulgarian standards, born into money. So when I say apartment, don't think of a typical, grotty Sofian flat. Think more along the lines of one of those unrealistically huge apartments from an American sitcom. His parents had gone away for the weekend to either Spain or Italy or somewhere else suitably warm, and as such, things were set to go wild. When the night finally rolled around, I dressed up in my zombie costume and set out to meet some friends. Minchko's invitation said that the party started at 8, so naturally, me and my group of chums didn't plan to arrive until 10. Gotta be fashionable. When we did arrive, most of the guests were already pretty drunk. The vodka was flowing freely, put it like that. They had a massive punch bowl, which was probably only 10% juice knowing Minchko. Some of us had a few midterm exams coming up, so we didn't want to go too wild. We just had a few beers, while everyone else pigged out on punch. Other than the people on my course, there was one other guy who wasn't really drinking that night. Some dude in a wolfman mask who was just hanging around the punch bowl. He didn't seem to know anybody at the party and was keeping to himself. Looked a little awkward, to be honest. The friendly half of me wanted to introduce myself, invite him to hang out with me and my friends. My socially anxious other half, however, decided against that. The night goes on, and one of the partiers starts to complain about having stomach pain. I figure he's overdone it. Some guys really can't handle their alcohol. He makes his way to the bathroom and starts vomiting. Not long afterwards, another guest starts complaining about the same problem, and then another, and another. Eventually, a dozen or so people are grabbing their stomachs in pain. Things start to seem serious, with some people even vomiting on the living room floor. A little worried, someone calls for medical assistance. At the hospital, things turned out not to be an extreme instance of alcohol poisoning. Instead, we found out that the punch bowl contained a secret ingredient that someone had slipped in. It had been laced with rat poison. Thankfully, the dosage wasn't high enough to kill anyone immediately, but without treatment, the amount could have been fatal within a few hours. At a party full of drunk people, it was totally possible that no one would have been sober enough to react appropriately and call an ambulance. Somebody also could have easily passed out, not realizing that they'd been poisoned. Thankfully, though many were hospitalized, nobody ended up with any prolonged health issues. When we were questioned about what we all knew, the guy in the wolf mask came into my mind. He had been hanging around the punch bowl. I mentioned it to the police, and said that one of the other guests must have known who he was. Talking to my friends about it afterwards though, it seemed like nobody did know who he was. Everybody assumed that he was a friend of somebody else's, and didn't bother to question his attendance. As far as anybody could remember, nobody talked to him, nobody saw him without his mask on, and nobody even remembered who he turned up with, or even when he arrived at all. He had just slipped in unnoticed. To begin with, the police investigation turned up very little. It seemed as though it was just a one-off incident, some guy wanting to cause harm to a lot of people at once. But people like that rarely try this sort of thing only once. Almost 1 year later to the day, on the next Halloween weekend, the exact same thing happened at a party in a different part of town. This time, the amount of poison used was increased. 3 people almost lost their lives that night, and 10 were hospitalized. This time, however, the perpetrator was tackled by another partygoer who realized what he was up to. Under questioning, the police realized that the guy in the wolf mask was obviously a little disturbed in the head. He cited an event known as the Jonestown Massacre as his inspiration behind his actions. Looking into it, it turns out it was an event in the late 70s where over 300 members of a cult died after being forced to drink from a poisoned punch bowl. This unstable nutjob wanted to pay homage to the largest mass suicide in history. For the first time in my life, I was damn thankful that I had exams coming up. I'm known for going a little bit wild at parties, and for trying to drink everyone under the table. Who's to say I wouldn't have chugged more poison punch than my body could have handled? Whenever Minchko hosts a Halloween party now, he always checks under everyone's mask at the door, just to make sure they're on the guest list.
JF lives in a small area of Texas called Del Valle, where there is little more than gas stations, schools, houses, and cows. She usually considered this place rather boring, but one night a few days before Halloween would change all that for her. On this night, JF was driving her boyfriend to his house at about 8:30 p.m. Being a person who says she can almost always sense immediate danger or evil, JF's heart began to beat rapidly. For some unknown reason, chills ran down her spine, and she began to perspire, even though she had the car's AC on full blast. I was getting an eerie feeling that something evil was up ahead, she says. We are all familiar with how an animal's eyes glow in a creepy way when a light is shone into them. Up the hill, about 2 minutes from my house, a black dog walked right in front of my car, JF says. She thought it was peculiar that the animal was just casually walking across the road without any apparent fear of getting hit by her car. I hit the brakes and managed to stop about 5 feet from the dog, she remembers. It just stood there and stared at me. I turned on my high beams, and when I saw its eyes, they turned a golden, reddish tint. It stood there for about a minute, then walked away. I hit the gas and sped off, terrified. But when I looked back, the dog was nowhere in sight. JF proceeded home, but could not shake the weird feeling of dread that overcame her before and during her encounter with that black dog. Was it a harbinger of something more terrifying? JF believes it was a catalyst for a very disturbing dream a few nights later. I dreamed that I was in my room listening to music when it all of a sudden stopped, she recalls vividly. I looked at my iPod and it was still playing, but there was no sound. I looked at my door and there was a man in a black trench coat staring at me. It wasn't the fact that there was a man in my room that freaked me out. It was his face. It was red with black cracks all over, and he had horns. His eyes were a deep gold with no pupil, and he had long fangs coming out of his mouth. I just sat there staring at him. Then he said, "It's time." And that's when I noticed a watch in his left hand. When he spoke, his breath came out as smoke and reeked of burning, spoiled meat. He made a grab for my neck, and that's when I woke up. The first smell that came to me was burning, spoiled meat. JF continues to be haunted by those connected experiences. I can never be outside now, not at night. Demons and ghosts exist outside. I have purified my room because it seems that's where I'm most vulnerable. These entities seem to appear when I'm trying to enjoy life.
This took place in Rhode Island when I was much younger, back in my college days. This was on the local Rhode Island news, so if you tried hunting, I'm sure you could find it. I was dating a girl that went to school in a town I won't name. It was the summer and everyone was back home. My girlfriend's best friend had an internship back in that town, and this girl had a 4-bedroom multi-family home to herself. The other 3 roommates were paying for their rooms, but chose to stay home. I guess they could only get this place if they started paying the rent 2 to 3 months prior to school starting, but whatever. One weekend, my girlfriend asks me to go to that town with her to spend some time with her friend. She's lonely and has nothing to do on the weekends. We're only like an hour away, so it sounds like a plan. We head down and we just chill for the night. We walk by a guy on our way home from the gas station, and he's just staring at us. Kind of creepy, but no big deal. This wasn't the best of areas, but certainly not the worst. We eventually all pass out, and me and my girlfriend head home the next day. The end of the week comes, and my girlfriend asks if I want to go and visit her friend again, but I have to work all weekend, so I decline. She heads down there alone, and her friend's boyfriend is coming over to stay as well. Pretty much a repeat of the weekend before. They all drink, but end up going out and partying a little bit. They're walking back after a night of drinking when they enter the mudroom at around 2 AM. The mudroom door had been left unlocked. They close it behind them, and there's a really raggedy looking dude in there waiting for them. He says out loud to them, "Get in the fucking house." They all turn around, and he has a gun. My girlfriend's friend has already unlocked the door to the house, and it's partially opened. Everyone is frozen in place, and the guy repeats himself, "Get in the fucking house." The boyfriend then steps forward with his hands up a little bit, trying not to seem confrontational. "Hey man, calm down. It's all good." I don't know how the fuck this dude was brave enough to do any of this. As he says that, the intruder shoots him. My girlfriend and her friend run into the house and hide under a bed. They can't hear this, but the assailant took off and didn't follow them back in. They don't know this though, and they're terrified, hiding under a bed while the boyfriend is screaming for help. They think the psycho's in the house and is looking for them. My girlfriend told me they were both silently crying under the bed while the boyfriend screamed for help. The worst part was that he was yelling, "Help me, I'm dying." The neighbors heard the gunshot and screaming, and they called the police. They ended up catching the dude. He'd been watching the girl for weeks. It was the guy we had seen watching us the week prior. Worst part was, the girl's boyfriend didn't make it.
There's something to be said for the age of modern convenience. As I listened to my boss draw on and on during our Zoom meeting, I thumbed through various items on Amazon that I didn't need to buy, but felt compelled to buy. I had multiple orders on the way, and the highlight of my day had become receiving text alerts from Amazon with a little photo of my package leaning against my doorframe, the black arrow on the box greeting me with a smile. It was a feedback loop I'd come to rely on. Speak of the devil, My phone buzzed with the delivered alert. I had gotten a yoga mat and some other items for my apartment, and more were on the way. My boss broke through my consumer haze. "Martin, can we expect that report by the end of today?" I had completely forgotten about the report. I unmuted my mic and said, "Yeah, I need to add a little more to it, but I'll finish it up before I leave today." There was a gentle murmur of laughter. I was working from home, so I wouldn't be exactly going anywhere. "Well, you know what I mean," I added. Working from home continued to blur the imaginary boundaries I struggled to maintain between work and personal life. Now, there wasn't much of a distinction between when I was on the clock or off. My desk space, where I would play video games and browse the internet, had become the same place I'd take Zoom calls and respond to passive-aggressive emails. Thankfully, I had a work laptop that helped me mentally separate these activities, but I knew I would be working late, far past when the office would typically close. After all, I was already home, wasn't I? The end of the workday didn't exist anymore. I muted my cell phone and forgot all about the package waiting by the door for me. I finished cobbling together my report by 10 p.m., and by that point, my brain was so shot that I decided just to watch some TV and go to bed early. It wasn't until I grabbed my phone to charge it that I noticed that I had received 6 notifications from Amazon. I swiped to expand the text. They were all for the same package, which had already been delivered. Confused, I thumbed over to the track package screen and noticed that multiple pictures had been taken from the same package and sent as updates. The light in the background of the photos had faded, and by the time the last photo was sent, it was dark out, and my porch light was illuminating the package below. "What the?" I whispered. I couldn't fathom why the delivery person would keep swinging by my door to let me know that my package was still sitting there. I hadn't noticed before, but by the last photo, the package was oriented differently, as if the delivery person had nudged it closer to the door. I didn't know whether to feel impressed or creeped out by the delivery person's dedication. I did live in a large apartment complex, and it wasn't unusual to see Amazon trucks coming and going at all hours of the day, but I never received more than one notification that a package had been delivered, let alone multiple photos of the same delivery. I quickly explained to myself that people were probably ordering more things than usual during the cold winter months, so Amazon had been more vigilant about packages being stolen from doorsteps and went heavy on the notifications so they didn't have to worry about resending stolen or missing packages. It didn't explain everything, but it did make enough sense for the time being. I peeked out the window by the side of my front door. It was dark out, and I couldn't see much at all. I opened the door and found the corridor empty like a graveyard. No one was there. I uttered to myself, "Bloody freak," and closed the door. I plugged my phone in so it could charge and slid into bed. I must have been almost dreaming when a text alert on my phone woke me up. I reached over to my nightstand and felt a pang in my chest as I looked at my phone. It was another text from Amazon. When I thumbed over to what had been delivered, it wouldn't say. The field had been rendered blank, but I could see a picture of a yellow mailer envelope leaning against my door. The photo quality was low grade, but the package looked a bit dirty for some reason. I was beyond perplexed. I had never received an update in the middle of the night before and couldn't believe that was standard Amazon procedure. Maybe the delivery guy was legitimately high. Reluctantly, I got out of bed and walked to my door. Just for safety, I looked through the peephole and again saw no one on either side. After a few seconds, I opened the door, found the muddy envelope lying on the floor. I picked it up and pulled the crooked flap open to look inside. The hallway light above my head caught the glint of something, and I could tell that it was at least dark in color. I turned the envelope upside down and let whatever was inside tumble out into my palm. I took a closer look and violently recoiled as I understood what I was seeing. They were teeth, bloody rotten teeth. The kind you see as a result of giving bad oral hygiene. Yes, that's what they were. The envelope was full of them. So many, in fact, that I doubt that they came all from one mouth. What I had mistaken as mud on the envelope was dried blood. I stifled the urge to vomit and grabbed my phone to call the police when my eyes went to the end of the long corridor. A man stood at the end while staring at me with huge, ferocious eyes. His eyes were glassy blue and could stare into your soul. He shouted at me saying, "Do you know how much hard work it takes to deliver packages door to door? Listen, dude. No, you listen. Even after a tiresome day, I cared to wait for the safety of your package. I kept on texting you as it lay unprotected in the open, outside your door, but you were so busy living your pathetic life. And in return of my favor, you called me a freak? Do I look like a freak to you? You're asking me this after leaving rotten teeth on my doorstep? Those belong to the people who insulted me so far. I made them pay because they didn't appreciate me. And now it's your turn." What? What the hell are you saying, man? But before I could get my answer, the man took out a knife from his back pocket and started to come at me full speed. It happened in a wink, and I got inside my apartment and went to close the door. The psycho was so fast that before I could lock the door, he inserted his arm into the gap as he tried to stab me. But I was no easy scare either. I slammed the door hard on his hand, and a cracking sound took place. He screamed in terrible pain, and the knife fell out of his hand. Blood sprung out from the broken bone, which pierced out of his skin. I could see the white bone filled with a grayish bone marrow cutting his flesh and splattering blood all over my wall. The man was definitely a nut job, because even though he was beyond hurt, he still didn't budge. Not having any other option, I hit him in his wound with my elbow, and his partial hand broke down swinging like a tattered piece of bloody cloth. Finally, he let go and removed his hand, and I double-locked my door. "Leave now, or I'm calling the cops on you. I'll be back. No one has ever lived in peace after insulting me. I'll be back soon." I could hear him leaving as his crazy laugh faded away. I have complained about Amazon, and they have reported this man to the cops, but no one has been able to contact him since that night. The cops are still looking for him, and I only hope he never shows up at my door again. I haven't shopped at Amazon for a while. That goes without saying. There's a person at your front door. I opened my eyes and glanced at my nightstand. My phone was buzzing with a notification. According to the alarm clock, it was 3:03 a.m. I reached for the phone, still half asleep. There is a person at your front door. My Ring doorbell camera was active. Something had set off the motion detector. Well, someone. A face filled up my screen. I didn't recognize the man. He was pale, eyes were wide, lips were thin, wearing a baseball cap over long hair. The stranger slipped off camera for a moment, and I got out of bed, moving carefully so I didn't wake up Susan. There was a bat in the corner. I grabbed that and a flashlight from the nightstand, then headed downstairs. I heard a scraping sound from the other side of the front door. Taking a deep breath, I held the bat close. "What are you doing out there?" I called out. The sound stopped. There was a long silence, I became excruciatingly aware that I left my phone upstairs. "Just a delivery," the man responded eventually. "Amazon." "It's 3 in the morning. Sorry to disturb you." I heard footsteps, then an engine starting. I peeked out of the window. I saw a brown delivery truck pull out of the shared parking lot between our townhouses. After a few minutes, I opened the door, and there was a white Amazon package with a familiar smiling logo. I brought the box inside, then locked and deadbolted the door. This package wasn't for me. It was the wrong name and wrong address. What the hell kind of Amazon guy makes deliveries in the middle of the night? I asked myself, shaking the box. I decided to put it back in the mail the next morning so it could be on its way to the right address. The same Amazon truck drove through the neighborhood a dozen times over the next week. I saw the driver making his rounds at all hours of the day. He wore the same jeans and faded hoodie constantly. The man was thin, a little on the short side, and he walked with a manic energy to his step. I'd never seen a delivery driver so excited to be on his route. He seemed to be most active late at night. More than once, I'd peek out of the window to see him standing close to the neighbor's door, fidgeting, then dropping a package roughly on the welcome mat. The first murders took place the next weekend. "Terry, come over here," Susan called from the living room. I was in the kitchen making us dinner. My wife mentioned for me to join her at the window. I noticed the red and blue flashing lights before I reached her. There were 3 police cars in our parking lot, as well as an ambulance. Uninformed officers swarmed around the townhouse, directly across from our own. While we stood staring, paramedics wheeled out a stretcher carrying a black body bag. A second team followed with another gurney. On this one held one of our screaming, twitching neighbors. "Jesus," Susan whispered. "Is that Mrs. McCourt?" It was hard to tell from a distance, that with our view blocked by the cops, but the woman on the stretcher looked an awful lot like her elderly neighbor. Her blanket was covered in red stains. Something had torn up her face and neck, ripping her cheeks open to the bone. The skin hung in wet flaps. While I couldn't be too sure, it appeared like one of her eyes was gone, leaving nothing but a raw socket. "Do you think it was an animal attack?" Susan asked. "I don't know. Can you ask your brother?" I sighed. You know he doesn't like talking about ongoing cases. It could get him into trouble with his captain. "He doesn't need to give you all the gruesome details. Just ask him if the police know what happened. If it was animals, a dog, or something else." "I'll ask," I promised. It wasn't an animal attack. My brother filled me in on as much as he could. "I thought about you and Susie when I heard the call come in. Tommy told me over the phone. When I heard the address, I knew it was right by you. Awful. Brutal stuff, man. They found the husband tied up on the kitchen floor. He'd been stabbed a dozen times, and then his throat slit so deep, his head nearly came off. The wife was alive when the officers got there, but she was a mess. Somebody had been cutting on her for hours, even took one of her eyes out." "Good Lord," I whispered. How is she doing?" "I'm afraid she died at the hospital. There was nothing they could do to help her. Too much blood loss." I heard my brother hesitate. "Look, with this being so close to you, I gotta ask, did you see anything at all? Anything suspicious? According to our timeline, whatever psycho did this probably broke into their house in the early morning and really took his time. There were no signs of a forced entry, so we think they might have been someone the victim knew. Do you know if the McCourts had any enemies or disgruntled family members? Troubled friends?" No, Tommy, sorry. We didn't know the couple that well." "All right. Well, if you think someone targeted the event, I don't doubt there's any danger for you or Susan. But keep an eye out for anything suspicious, just in case, okay?" "Sure, Tommy." The second I hung up, A face floated up to my mind. The thin Amazon driver in the hoodie and the ball cap. I shook my head. Amazon drivers were everywhere. Who could be less suspicious? The next murder happened at the townhouse, only 2 doors down from ours. It was a few days after the McCourts died. I woke up to the sound of sirens. This time, instead of watching from the window, I went downstairs and stood on my porch. The parking lot was full of police. An officer started heading towards me immediately, notepad in one hand and a flashlight in the other. It was dark outside, even with the glow of the street lamps. Before the officer brought me back into my house to take a statement, I got a good look at the neighbor's house through their window. I wish I hadn't. The living room was one big slick bloodstain. Our neighbors were 3 college students sharing the townhouse. 2 guys and a girl, I think. It might have been a couple and their friend. They were nice. We always exchanged good mornings when I was out walking the dogs. All 3 seemed like good kids. Somebody had decapitated the trio and swapped their heads around, then duct taped them back on different bodies. Their stomachs were sliced open, with the inside bits pulled out and left on the rug in wet purple-gray piles. I just made it downstairs into the bathroom before I threw up. We don't like using the term serial killer this early in an investigation, Tommy told me when I called him the next morning. But I understand that it's alarming for you all. 5 murders in 2 households right next door? It might be time for you and Susan to take a trip away for a while. I was looking out of my window at the parking lot. There was crime scene tape right next door, and more of the yellow and black tape across the lot at the McCourt's place. But that wasn't what had my attention. There was a familiar brown delivery truck parked a few spaces down at another townhouse. I watched the driver standing at the person's door, lingering far longer than he needed to. He dropped the package carelessly on the porch and practically skipped back to his truck. Do you remember when you asked me to report anything suspicious? I asked Tommy while I reached for a pen. There's a license plate I think you should run. I jotted the number down of the truck as it drove out of the parking lot. The driver and I made eye contact before I left. He smiled and tossed me a little wave. They found the driver with his truck parked near a local McDonald's later that afternoon. Tommy filled me in on the details the next day. It was bad, Terry. The worst I'd ever seen, my brother told me, staring down into his coffee cup. You saved some lives by noticing the Amazon driver. Except the man really wasn't a driver for the company. His name was Alfred Ward. It looks like he murdered the actual driver and stole the truck about 3 weeks ago. He even disabled the GPS tracker, so it's been off the grid. Alfred's been dropping off the packages to incorrect addresses every day since. See, that was just an excuse to get on every doorstep. What Alfred was really doing was taking impressions of the locks. That's why there was never any sign of forced entry. He made keys and let himself in. Alfred, he had a key to your place, Terry. We found it in the truck, along with more than a dozen others. And we found the other driver. Or what was left of the driver, I should say. Alfred got hungry, I guess. Took a few bites out of the guy each day. Tommy's hand was shaking as he took a sip from his coffee. The driver's arms and legs were stripped to the bone, Terry. Gnawed on, like an animal got to them. And the worst part? When we took Alfred in, he was smiling. He looked so happy when he opened the trunk and saw all the blood. I didn't say a word in reply. I just paid the bill for the breakfast and left. My first stop was the hardware store. I needed to change the locks.
I was 18 or 19 years old when this happened, still living with my parents in Billings, Montana. We were hosting a foreign exchange student, Faye, a girl from China who was the same age as me. Her English was pretty good, so we became friends. Now, I'm a guy, but there was nothing going on between us. She was more like a little sister figure to me, seeing how she lived at my house and all. Anyway, the two of us snuck out one night to go to this party. We got home late, around 1 a.m. I think, and we both quietly walked up the stairs and tried not to wake my parents. Faye silently crept into her bedroom down the hallway, and I went inside mine and hopped into bed. I was so tired that I drifted off to sleep within minutes. I don't know what time it was, but I was awoken in the middle of the night by the sound of creaking in my bedroom. I woke up groggy, with my eyes tired from sleep, and scanned the room around me. The sound was coming from my closet door, which was slowly creeping open. There, emerging from my closet, was the dark outline of a human with a weird-shaped head. Now, I suffer from sleep paralysis from time to time, which means I often wake up with audio-visual hallucinations in the middle of the night. I quickly rationalized that the figure in my room wasn't real, and that the closet hadn't really opened. I was just in that place that's neither dream or reality. Even though I've had these experiences a lot of times in the past, it was still creepy to see the dark silhouette of a person looming out of my closet. I kept my eyes on the spectre as it slowly tiptoed to the end of my bed. It stopped, facing towards me, and began swaying from side to side. I closed my eyes, desperate to fall back to sleep and get rid of this nightmare creature at the foot of my bed. As I did, I heard its fake footsteps slowly backing out of my room towards the hall. Good. It would disappear soon, I thought. Then, I heard the sound of my bedroom door carefully being closed. What the? Something wasn't right about this hallucination. It wasn't like all the others. Every time, the figure would just dissolve and fade away as reality took over, but this one legitimately just exited my room. Now, sure that I was fully awake, I decided to get up out of bed. I walked towards my closed bedroom door and quietly opened it. There, standing in the hallway, opening the door to Faye's room, was the same dark figure. It wasn't a hallucination after all. It was a man, a stranger in our house, creeping into my friend's bedroom. I let out a loud, "Hey!" which of course startled the guy. He dropped something on the floor. In the dark, I couldn't make out what it was. I hit the hallway light switch on my left. The hall lit up. I could see him clearly now. His head wasn't weirdly shaped at all. He was wearing a mask, holding some sort of small club in his hand. On the floor by his feet was a small length of rope. From inside her room, I heard Faye let out a terrified scream. She must have woken up during the commotion. The masked man darted down our staircase. In all honesty, I had no idea how to react. I just stood there like a rabbit in headlights, totally shocked that this wasn't sleep paralysis after all. My father came storming out of my parents' bedroom at the far end of the hall. I screamed that a man was just in my room and that he was about to go into Faye's. He rushed back into his bedroom, came out with his firearm, and made his way down the stairs after the guy. We heard the roar of a car engine outside. The intruder had parked his ride somewhere near our house. I heard no shots, no shouting. My dad didn't make it outside fast enough to catch the guy or spot his plates. To this day, we still have no idea who he was, if he lived near to us, why he targeted us, nothing. The only time the house was empty that day was around 2 p.m, meaning this guy either snuck inside while we were at the party and my parents were sleeping, or he'd been hiding inside our house for around 12 hours, biding his time. From what the cops think, he came to get Faye, to knock her out with the club and tie her up, take her out to his car and drive off. Thing is, when he broke in, he hid in the closet in the wrong room. He stood at the end of my bed, trying to work out if I was Faye in the dark, probably thinking if he should bludgeon me or not. I have no idea what motivated the guy. Infatuation? Hatred? Who knows? but the fact that he brought rope and a cudgel with him and hid silently inside our house for what must have been hours leads me to think his intentions were pure evil. Faye moved back to China soon after that. I miss her, but I can't say that I blame her for leaving. I mean, wouldn't you? About 3 weeks ago, my mum told my brother and I this story. Sally is a lifelong family friend. She would frequently visit her friends and family in Oklahoma. We live in a small town in southern Ontario, Canada. So, Sally would drive. Sally would drive straight 20 hours at least overnight to get from our town to another small town. She did this to save money, and obviously she wanted to arrive as soon as possible. Now that you've heard the prelude, here's the story. About 30 years ago, she decided to head south for a visit. No big deal, she's done this a few times now. So, she packs up and heads out. At some point, after driving about 14 or 15 hours, she started getting pretty tired. Being as it was probably the 80s, it was a little safer. So, she decided that she would stop at a rest stop for the night to get some sleep, and resume again first thing in the AM. She parks in a very well lit and busy rest stop. She parks right by the lights, and felt at ease because there was an abundance of travellers stopping and going. She gets out of her car for a bathroom break, comes back, and settles in her car. About then, an RV pulls up beside her, and an elderly couple get out. The man asks her about coming from Canada. They strike up a little conversation. Nothing odd. The couple just talk to Sally for a little bit. They tell her that they're driving from the south, going north, and they just needed to have a sleep for the night. They wanted to talk because they were unsure if the rest stop was okay to stop at. They say good night and good trip, and the couple head back to their RV. Sally locked her doors up and went to sleep. 2 or 3 hours later, Sally woke up with a really unsettling feeling. She looks around. Nothing. A few people going in the stop. Parking lights are all on. She assumes she's just feeling bad because she's tired and her car isn't the best place to sleep in. After 10 minutes, she actually said that this feeling got worse, and it was a jarring, queasy, uneasy feeling. She sits back and tries to shrug it off. This doesn't work, and apparently she had every red alarm and instinct telling her that she needed to go. She panics, starts her car and peels off. She doesn't care where, she just knew that she needed to get away from there. About 20 miles down the road, she finds a motel and gas station. She decides to see if she could get a room there for what little money she had. She converses with the person in charge. He cuts her a deal because he doesn't want to see a young woman driving alone late at night. She gets a key, pops in her hotel room, and sleeps for the night. No issues whatsoever. Around 9 AM, she wakes up, showers, changes clothes, and decides to relax for a few. She turns on the TV, and what she said was on it actually gave me chills. There was a breaking news story about an elderly couple who had been killed in the middle of the night. The news shows the RV that Sally was parked next to, in the exact same spot, at the exact same stop. She even sees the fast food drink cup that she dropped by accident that rolled under her car. Sometime during the night, a man broke into their RV and killed them, and then simply left. Presumably this all happened right before Sally had left. The man was never caught, and Sally, since then, stopped at hotels for the night and avoided rest stops.
My boyfriend has been acting a little weird lately. It's the stories he stays up watching all night in the basement. They're making him paranoid. I sometimes wake up at night not finding him beside me, and then I could see him sitting in the corner of the bedroom, staring at me with his wide blue eyes. Mason, are you all right? Without blinking his creepy eyes, he nods his head very slowly from left to right and says, "No." "What is it?" "I think something very bad is going to happen to me." "What? Why?" "Because I..." And then he would stare at me blankly for a minute straight, completely silent, completely still. "Mason, you're scaring me now. Stop this nonsense. Come back to bed." I'll take the couch tonight." This has become the deal every other night. I'm fed up with his weird behavior. But he's the best boyfriend I've ever had. He's such a hard worker and is always bringing me sweets and gifts home. I love him and the routine we put ourselves into. Mason often works late, but when he gets home, we have dinner, watch Big Brother, and then go to bed. We do different things from there. He usually stays up and watches scary stories on MJV, and I browse Instagram. But you all know how it is. I want to be a part of the things he enjoys. Finally, Mason showed me this YouTube channel after begging him to let me watch some of his favorite stories. As I said, Mason has been acting strange lately, and I know it's because of these stories. He's added a sort of patrol to our nightly routine. He makes sure all the doors and windows are locked and all the curtains are closed before coming to bed. I find it silly. We live in a good neighborhood. We've never had any trouble. There's nothing out there for him to be afraid of. He always brushes me off and tells me it's just for peace of mind. One night, after checking all the locks and curtains, Mason climbed into bed. We watched YouTube for a while and then kissed goodnight. It took only a few minutes for him to fall asleep, and when he did, I quietly got out of bed and went into the kitchen. When I came back, I watched him sleep for a moment. He looked so sweet, pure, and innocent. He opened his eyes and tried to sit up abruptly when I slit his throat. Blood gushed as the knife ran smoothly, like it was cutting through butter, spewing everywhere, on my face, my clothes, on the bedside lamp. I sighed, knowing I'd have to get rid of my satin nightgown. I threw the knife aside and pulled the previous prepared gas can from its hiding spot in the guest room. I sang to myself as I poured the gasoline all over Mason's now still body, all over the bed and on the carpet in a trail leading to the door. I lit a match and unceremoniously dropped it, watched only momentarily as the flames caught, and then walked away. Why would I do such a thing to the man I love, you ask? Well, it's simple. The real reason Mason had been working so hard was the cute blonde he had met a few months before. And since then, he forgot about me. Night after night, he kept lying to me. He would meet her at night, saying he took some extra shifts. The gifts he would bring me were for tokens of his betrayal. A cheap way to compensate for the emotional void is with material pleasure. That's why I had to go to such an extent to make him pay for breaking my heart. The reason why Mason acted weird was something more than those stories. When I couldn't make him continue to cheat on me, I decided to draw the line. I followed him one night and found out the girl's address. I saw them kissing, standing on her porch. My blood boiled. I wanted to kill both of them right there, but revenge is a dish best served cold. Last week, Mason went to see his grandparents in Austria. Dressed in Mason's clothes, I went to the girl's house and rang the bell. I kept my head down so she couldn't see my face clearly. That stupid blonde opened the door calling out, "Mason, what a surprise." And just then, I pepper sprayed her. Screaming in pain, she moved back from the door and I entered the house, locking it behind me. What fun we had after that. I tied her to the couch, gagged her with pretty pink socks. She stared at me widely, just like Mason from those nights. God, I loved the fear in her eyes. I felt a little bad for her, so I decided to make it easy. I closed her eyes while smiling at her. It gives me immense satisfaction to know I was the last face she saw before death. I injected her in the neck, right into the vein with an empty syringe. Within the next 10 seconds, her heart stopped and left a note for Mason. I knew he would come to see her first thing in the morning after he came home. I knew the note would set him paranoid. Since he came home, he changed. The reason why he looked out of the windows every night before going to bed is for the cops. He made sure he locked the doors so the writer of that note doesn't get to come in. Only if he knew he was living with her. I wish I could have seen his face when he read that note right next to his mistress's body. It was so easy to scapegoat Mason. I couldn't believe he actually got rid of the body. There was nothing in the news of the blonde girl's death, but when the missing reports started to spread out, Mason got even more nervous. And that's when I knew the time was right. One thing that played like my lucky card was the stories of MJV. Those scary stories triggered him in the most vulnerable moment. The cops will be here after some time. I'm sure they have already traced their text messages. The world will know Mason killed the girl to be with his girlfriend and ended up dying in a terrible house fire. The case will be closed, and I will be on the road looking out for my next Mason.
A formless darkness spreads over the land, draining away all joy and excitement. The name of this creeping horror? Boredom. But one RPG stands alone against the gloom. Raid Shadow Legends helps you slay boredom with complex strategies, gorgeous graphics, and countless character build options. How does it work? In Raid Shadow Legends, you'll build and level teams of champions to loot dungeons, kill monsters, and battle players around the globe. You can also take on an incredible array of challenging bosses. Take Bomal the Dreadhorn. He's a flame-spewing, bomb-throwing beast who sets explosive traps and summons tough kamikaze minions. You'll have to get creative with your debuffs and healing to avoid being overwhelmed by waves of defense, bypassing damage. And Bomal is just one of tons of awesome bosses to test yourself against. There's a ton going on in Raid Shadow Legends this month. The ongoing Summer Splash event series gives you a shot at tons of awesome prizes, like an exclusive new skin for the hard-hitting dwarf champion, Trunda. Plus, right now you can score the brand new legendary champion, Deliana, just by playing the game for 7 days in a row. Deliana's an incredible support champion who can crack enemy resistance while boosting and healing your team. Even better news for new players, you can use the promo code MyDeliana to nab 50 XP brews and pump her up to max level instantly. There's no better time to join Raid, especially since my viewers can get a bunch of starting bonuses by scanning this QR code. It'll start you off with a free epic champion, Aina, to give your early team some hard-hitting muscle. You'll also get an energy refill, an XP boost, 200,000 silver, and an ancient shard so you can summon powerful champions right away. So scan that code, claim your loot, and dive into the endless adventure of Raid Shadow Legends.
I can't seem to shake this horrible feeling. It's like a sixth sense going off, leaving me in a constant state of an anxiety-ridden fear. It's been weeks like this. I've tried to rationalize what's happening the best I can, but for the life of me, I can't find a logical explanation. I'm just looking for some advice now. My boyfriend Jeremy and I have been together for a little over 3 years, mostly through a long distance while I'm finishing my degree. Things have been wonderful, and I've experienced some of my happiest moments, at least up until a few weeks ago when it started. It wasn't until my first night back at his place over the summer that I noticed anything. We must have dozed off around midnight. I remember jolting awake at 2 a.m., flashing on the screen of Jeremy's alarm clock. I couldn't tell you what woke me, but whatever it was stayed quiet enough for Jeremy to stay soundly asleep. I felt a shiver go down my spine and that horrible, anxious sixth sense sounding alarms in my head. Given the placement of Jeremy's bed, I had a clear view of his bedroom, bathroom, and closet door, which all sat against the same wall. Through the darkness, my eyes darted from corner to corner, but I didn't see anything unusual. I just couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. After a few more seconds of investigating, it hit me. His bedroom door sat against the wall, wide open. We weren't the type of people to sleep in our bedroom with the doors open, and over the years, I even picked up the habit of locking mine before bed, and I could have sworn I did the same to his. My heart sank to my stomach as my eyes adjusted to the darkness. A figure loomed in the doorway, staring back at me. I guess I assumed someone broke in. I don't know. Whatever it was stood quietly watching me as I frantically fumbled around the sheets with my hand, searching to shake Jeremy awake. Jeremy, wake up, wake up. It took a step closer, towering above the doorframe. Keeping my eyes on the figure, I aggressively shook Jeremy's shoulder. Jeremy! I hissed under my breath, petrified tears forming in my eyes. Jeremy, there's someone here. With my other hand, I felt along with the nightstand until I came upon my phone. What? He sat up, rubbing his eyes awake. Another step closer. Looking at me, Jeremy nudged my face towards him and wiped my tear-stained cheek. What's going on, babe? I pressed my home button, hoping to call 911, but the screen stayed black. There's someone in the room, I whispered hysterically, hitting my phone in a poor attempt to make it turn on. Using his phone, Jeremy turned on the flashlight and moved the light around the room. Nobody's here, babe, he said, looking up from his phone's blank screen. I made the same discovery. Sure enough, the room was empty, and the bedroom door soundly shut. After explaining what I'd seen, Jeremy argued that I woke up from a bad dream, that nothing was there, and with the alarm system, nothing would have gotten in. I forced him to search the house. He didn't find anything, and didn't believe me, but I know what I saw. Since then, I haven't been back other than a dinner date, and even that night, I knew something was wrong. I've slept at my mom's ever since. I told Jeremy I missed my family, even though the reality was being too afraid to sleep at his place again. We FaceTime every night as a habit. Being in a long distance is anything but easy, so we tried to make the distance less noticeable, like sleeping on FaceTime or talking throughout the day. 2 nights ago, he said he'd be up late with the guys and didn't want to bother waking me, so I went to bed without calling. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to my phone ringing and Jeremy's contact picture lighting up on the screen. Hello? I answered the FaceTime groggily. It was dark and silent. Baby, are you there? I asked again. No response. I thought you weren't calling tonight, silly. Guessed you missed me too much, I joked. The call ended. After a few minutes of feeling really weird and honestly concerned, I called back. It took a few rings for him to finally answer, and when he did, he sounded like he'd been asleep for hours. Hey, is everything okay? Yeah, everything is fine. I was just calling you back. Did your phone die? What are you talking about? You just called me. Just didn't talk or anything. Maybe you fell asleep after you dialed. I didn't call you, babe. I've been asleep for like an hour. No outgoing call to you. Maybe you were just dreaming. Maybe. It just feels a little weird. Listen, I have to be up in a few hours. I know you've been on edge lately, but please put this behind you. You're just under stress. Okay? I love you. I hope you get your mind off of whatever you thought you saw. I nodded, but asked him to stay on the phone until he left for work in the morning. I don't like feeling crazy or experiencing horrible anxiety without cause. I understand the "I saw something in the middle of the night" bit is easily dismissible, but the feeling I'm having isn't. I've always felt like women have a special sense of danger. It's like knowing when to walk a little quicker to your car late at night, or grouping yourself with other women at a bar. It's knowing you aren't safe in your environment. Last night threw me over the edge, and I haven't been back to his apartment since. We FaceTimed as usual and fell asleep after. I woke up to rustling on the phone, which is usually muted to spare me from his snoring. I checked the clock to see if it was time for him to go to work. 2 a.m. I watched the screen looking for Jeremy. It was clear the phone was moving in the dark, seeing the ceiling move from the dim glow of the window. Jeremy? The camera stopped moving. Baby, I asked again. It started again, this time passing his ceiling fan. There was a soft thud against the nightstand, and I now looked at what seemed to be an upward-facing view of his bedside lamp. Hey, what's going on? There was a muffled groan and movement from what sounded like bed sheets. Babe, I said firmly. What's wrong? He groaned sleepily. I explained to him what I'd seen and asked if everything was okay. He assured me he'd been asleep and didn't know what I was talking about. Jeremy, please check your bedroom. After some more pressure, he gave in and checked his closet, bathroom, and the remainder of his apartment with his phone in his hand. I told you it was nothing. Someone was in your bedroom. Someone unmuted the phone and was walking around your freaking bedroom. You need to stop this, Kiara. It's becoming annoying now. I watched Jeremy get irritated. The camera screen showed him sitting on his bed staring at me with angry eyes. I was going to explain how all this was never a bad dream, just when I saw his window lift. A skinny, tall man entered his room. I was so taken aback from this that for a few seconds I forgot to talk. The man got in without Jeremy noticing and stood behind him. He wore this weird black suit, like he was going to a funeral. The most terrifying thing was he had no face. Seeing me, all pale and quiet, all of a sudden Jeremy asked, "What? What is it?" "There's someone behind you." "Stop this nonsense. Enough!" Saying this, Jeremy turned around, and what happened next will forever be imprinted in my memory. The man grabbed Jeremy's neck and lifted him in the air. His phone fell to the ground, and I could see Jeremy's feet dangling in the air. The screen could only capture his feet. The sound of choking mixed with heavy breathing went on for a few seconds, and then everything went silent. A loud thud took place, like someone threw something heavy on the floor. I screamed in fear. "Jeremy!" When that weird-looking man picked up the phone from the floor and showed me Jeremy's bedroom, the camera slowly revolved around the room and stopped, reaching the doorway. Right near the bedroom door, my boyfriend was lying dead on the floor. His eyes were coming out in fear. His tongue was hanging out of his mouth. His blue face was horrible. "Oh my God, Jeremy!" I cried in pain. Now the man faced the camera at him. It was terrifying to look at his faceless face. He smiled big, flashed his sharp teeth, and said in a demonic voice, "I'll be back for you." The cops ruled out the investigation of Jeremy's death as an accident. Some say he choked on his own, while others assured me that they looked for an intruder. But no one believed me when I told them about his killer. Everyone just stared at me like I'm some psycho. I don't know what to do next. Is there anyone who believes me? Because whatever that creature was, it indeed is coming for me now. I can feel its eyes on me when I sleep at night.
I lost my phone 2 days ago while out for a jog. It must have slipped from my pocket. Luckily, I got an email from a kind stranger the next day telling me they had my device. The person who found my phone wanted to meet me in the park. I asked if I could just swing by somewhere to pick it up, but they insisted in their email that they would be at the park on a bench near the fountain. So I pulled on my jacket and headed out into the snow. There was a woman waiting for me. She sat on the bench next to a frozen fountain. I stopped and watched her. The woman seemed familiar, but I couldn't place her. Early 30s, black hair, attractive features half hidden by a cap and scarf. She looked my way. I waved and walked over, boots crunching the fresh powder. "Hello," I said, flashing my best game show smile. "You found my phone?" Blue eyes regarded me from under a dark wool cap. "Sit down for a second, Jeremy." My grin started to dip, but I pinned it in place. "Sure," I joined the stranger on the bench. "No offense, and I truly appreciate you finding my phone, but I'm in a bit of a, you don't remember me?" Should I? The woman looked away. "Of course you wouldn't recognize me." She sighed and stood up. "Hey," I said. "I'm sorry, I've got a terrible memory. If you could just give me back the phone, you can have the phone back when you remember my name." I felt an ember of anger start to grow in my stomach. This psycho dragged me all the way out to a park in the snow, and now she's playing games. "Listen, lady, I'm sorry, I don't know who you are. Just give me my phone back and we're done here." She ignored me and began to walk away, hands in her pockets. "Hey, I'm talking to you," I shouted, hurrying after her. I reached out for her shoulder. Before I could touch her, the woman turned and sprayed me with something she had in her hand. The pain was immediate and stunning. My entire face felt like I'd plunged into a pot of boiling water. I lost sight of the world as my eyes swelled and watered. I struggled to breathe. I'd heard stories about pepper spray, but always chalked it up to exaggeration. If anything, stories about getting sprayed didn't do the compound justice. I screamed and curled up on the ground, pawing at my face. Eventually, I crawled off the path. I wiped snow across my face, trying to wash away the remaining pepper spray. By the time I was able to see more than a burning blur, the woman was gone. After I got back to my apartment, all I wanted to do was shower and go to bed. But I wasn't going to let that bitch in the park get away with stealing my phone and assaulting me. I opened my laptop. The girl was familiar. My first thought was that we knew each other in college or high school. I fired up Facebook. "What the fuck?" I growled. I couldn't get into my account. Facebook kept telling me my password was wrong. I logged into a backup account that I used to keep tabs on people that blocked me. When I searched for my own profile, I almost choked. Someone was posting insane status updates pretending they were me. Threatening family and friends, shit-talking the government, even my boss. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. That woman was trying to ruin my life. I needed advice. I opened up Zoom on the computer and called my best friend Barry. I could tell by his expression when he answered that he'd seen the crazy posts on my Facebook. "Are you okay, dude?" he asked. "I'm not doing that. It's that psycho from the park, the one that found my phone. She won't give it back. She's fucking with me." "Why?" I threw my hands up. "Dude, I don't fucking know. She says we know each other, but I can't remember her. She won't give me back the phone until I figure out her name." "Describe her." "White, black hair, blue eyes, about 5'2", around our age. She'd be kinda cute if she wasn't actively trying to sabotage my life. Wait, I got an email. Shit, it's from her." Barry was practically vibrating in his seat. Read it. "Have you figured it out yet?" the email began. "If not, here's a clue. I thought the world of you and you ruined my life. All I wanted was for you to like me, but you cost me everything. Did you make the last high school reunion? I looked for you. There was an attachment to the email. It was a screenshot of my bank account. She'd logged on using my phone and drained it all. My bank password was saved right on the device. All of my information. Fuck! I shouted, punching the table. Barry whistled. She's not playing around. It sounds like a jilted lover, my man. Who did you date in high school? Who didn't I date? Barry winked. Sly dog. Well, think hard. She said you meant the world to her and... Hey, hold on a second, someone's at the door. I saw Barry leave the screen to answer his door. Can I help? He said. A loud buzzing sound interrupted him. There was a crash. Barry? I asked. The woman from the park walked into view and sat down. Hi, Jeremy, she said. What did you do? What is going on? Come to Barry's place. If you call the police, I'll be gone before you get here. You'll never know why this is happening. Come alone. Hurry. She closed the computer, ending the Zoom. Calling the cops was my first instinct, but if the woman disappeared on me, I'd be fucked. My bank account, my social media. I kept a gun in the top of my closet, a small revolver I'd inherited from my dad. This didn't know who she was messing with. I took a cab to Barry's, then went around back to the alley. The woman was expecting me to come in the front door. Instead, I climbed the ladder on his fire escape. Barry never locked his windows, just in case any of our buddies needed to stay over without his asshole landlord interrogating them in the hall. His apartment was dark when I reached his floor. I slid the window open carefully. No sign of anybody. I slipped into the room, took 2 steps, then felt a pinch in my neck. The floor rushed up to meet me. When I woke up, the apartment was bright. Awake, sleepyhead? A voice asked from behind me. I tried to turn, but I was duct taped to the chair I was sitting in. The woman from the park walked into view. Without her coat and scarf, she looked even more familiar, but I still didn't remember her. What's my name? She asked. Where's Barry? The woman shook her head. You still don't know. It would be sad if it wasn't so infuriating. Why are you doing this? I snarled. Who are you? What did I do to you? The stranger pulled over a chair from the kitchen and sat across from me. I used to think you were all so cool, she said. I idolized you. All of you. God, you and Barry were like princes in high school. Star athletes, bright smiles, and fast cars. And the girls around you, so glamorous. I was a mess in those days, a background character in a show you all starred in. I just wanted to be your friend, to be like you. I tried so hard to get you to notice me. So when you finally asked me to go with you to a party, it was the best day of my life. A memory paced at the edge of my awareness. A face. A name. The woman leaned closer. She smelled like vanilla and dust. Do you remember yet? She asked. I shook my head. Max Baker's graduation party. The woman continued. We all went. I was so flattered to be included. We talked all night, you and me. We even danced. And then those red and blue lights filled up the windows. The cops came in. You and Barry slipped off into the bathroom with the white powder. You wanted me to try, but I wouldn't. And when the police came rolling in and they searched us, where do you think they found the drugs? Cassidy. The name hit me like a brick. It slithered into my mind along with a face. The woman's face. Only 15 years younger. Cassidy, I said. She smiled. Now you remember. You put the drugs in my purse. You, or maybe Barry. It doesn't matter. Either way, I was the one that got to spend the night in jail. I was the one who had to find a lawyer, to beg my parents to believe me. They didn't. You cost me everything. I lost my scholarship, my family thought I was a junkie, and the worst part, none of you bothered to reach out. You used me and threw me away and didn't even remember doing it. I'm sorry, I whispered. I was young. So was I, Cassidy said. She stood up and walked over to me, getting behind my chair, turning it so I could see the kitchen. Barry lay on the tile floor in a puddle of blood. My revolver was on the ground between us. The neighbors heard the gunshot, Cassidy said, pulling a syringe from her pocket. Police are on their way. I'm going to give you another dose, then untie you. And then, I'll leave the same way you came in, When the cops get here, they're going to wonder why your friend was shot with your gun. And, of course, you did threaten to kill him on Facebook. I'm sorry, I said again. I felt the needle enter my neck. I know, Cassidy said. I woke up in a jail cell, groggy and disoriented. There was no sign of Cassidy. I immediately called my lawyer. We were able to meet, and he told me that I'm facing charges of attempted murder. Barry survived the gunshot, but is lingering in a coma. If he wakes up, he can tell the police what really happened, but if he dies, I'll be in serious trouble. All I can do now is wait. I always enjoyed riding the subway to and from work. Each day was a new experience. Sometimes those experiences were ugly. Once I watched two women fight over a handbag until one of them smashed a glass bottle into the other's cheek. There was so much blood. I remember it splattering against the window like rain. Another time, a homeless man sat down in the seat across from me, looked me in the eye, pulled out what looked suspiciously like a human ear, and began to chew. I saw that man often on the train. Eventually, he faded into the background. It was wild, but I could tune it all out by focusing on my laptop. That computer was my life. I did most of my work there, played games, watched movies. I was even writing a screenplay. My whole world was on that laptop. So, you can imagine how devastated I was the morning I left it on the subway. You gotta understand that I was distracted. I was getting a phone call just as we arrived at my stop. It was Jane. Hey, I'm so glad you called me back, I said, squeezing through the crowd at the subway door. I'm sorry, babe. I promise that You were so pathetic. You know that, Dan? Jane said. My mom was right about you. I'm gonna give you another chance, but from now on, you are on thin ice. Babe, you won't be sorry. Shit. I was standing at the bottom of the stairs that would take me to the street. It had taken me that long to realize that the familiar weight of my laptop bag was missing from my shoulder. Dan, is everything okay? I have to call you back. Sorry. I hung up and ran back just in time to see the train pulling away into the tunnel. Shit. I raced up the stairs. The street was full of rushing figures and traffic. I hailed the first cab I could catch and told them to hurry to the next stop for the subway. We made it as the train was pulling in, but when I searched the car, my laptop was missing. The rest of the morning was a blur. I made it into the office late. My asshole boss Henry stopped by and pulled me from my fog. Hey, I noticed that you didn't copy me on that email to the board, Henry said, leaning against the wall of my cubicle. We're not supposed to do that, I muttered. I don't give a shit what the company wants you to do. Henry leaned in, breath smelling like eggs and something sweeter, maybe rum. No backtalk. When I tell you to jump, all you need to do is ask me off what bridge. Next time, copy me on the damn email. Now smile. You look so damn sour. I gritted my teeth as Henry walked away, swallowing everything I wished I could say to him. There was a notification blinking on my screen when I turned back to my monitor. It was an email from myself. It was in my work inbox, sent from my personal account. The subject line read, "Why do you put up with it?" There was no text in the body of the email, but there was an attachment. I opened it and gasped. It was a picture of me at my desk with Henry looming over me. Someone must have taken it from the office only moments ago. And if they sent it through my personal email account... My laptop, I hissed. Someone found it that morning, and they were using it to mess with me already. Hell, they were stalking me if they were in my office. I stood up, peeking over the top of my cubicle like a meerkat. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. No strange, shadowy figures lurking by the copier. Another email came in from my account. I'm going to help you. Again, only a subject line, no message and no attachment this time. I stood up and scanned the room. No sign of Henry. I decided to slip out, staying low until I made it to the elevator. When I got home, I locked and bolted my door. I hadn't seen anyone following me, but whoever had my laptop would already know my address. It was probably how they found my office. Everything about me really was on that computer. I needed time to think, to plan, and I needed a fucking drink. I was in the middle of mixing a whiskey and Coke when my phone began to buzz. You're such a fucking asshole, Jane yelled as soon as I picked up. Jane, wait, what? I don't understand. Why? I saw the message you sent me on Instagram. If you're gonna break up with me, have the decency to do it in person. And how dare you tell me it's my fault for nagging you? I was trying to help you. You were so... Wait, did you just send me another message now? Jane, no, don't open it. I lost my... You asshole! Well, if you were so in love with my sister, you go ahead. You two deserve each other. Jane, that wasn't me. Someone hacked my account and... Jane? Are you there? She'd hung up. I picked my drink up, spilling some from a shaky hand. The bastard who stole my laptop was pretending to be me and ruining my life. Thump, thump, thump. Boom, boom, boom. My neighbors were at it again, blasting their music at full volume. It wasn't even 11 a.m. I debated knocking on their door and asking them to turn it down, but last time I tried, they just laughed. My phone buzzed again, an email this time from me. You can do better than Jane. Fuck you, give me back my laptop, I replied. A few minutes passed before I got a new message. He's so mean. The email had an attachment, another picture. I opened it and felt the drink slip from my hand. It shattered on the kitchen floor. I recognized the bathroom. It was the men's room for my office. Henry was sitting on the toilet in the handicap stall. Someone had gutted him, slitting his beer belly open so that his guts poured onto his lap. Oh, God, I whispered. I felt sick. I wanted to crawl under my sink and find peace in silent darkness, but my neighbor's music was so loud my dishes were shaking in the sink. Suddenly, the music stopped. There was a knock at my door. Before I could take a step towards the door, another email came in. It's time we talk. I stood in the kitchen staring at the door to my apartment. The knock came again. I took a deep breath, grabbed a butcher knife from the block on the counter, and walked to the door. When I opened it, a small man with white hair and a black mustache was looking at me. He was wearing my laptop bag. Mind if I come in? The man asked. I think I have something that belongs to you. He looked so familiar, but I couldn't place him. Sure. I held out my hand for the laptop, but he only smiled and shook his head before walking in. Not yet, he told me. We stood in my living room, him with a little grin, me trying to push down a panic attack. Mind if I sit down, Dan? The man asked. I nodded. Wait, how do you know my name? He lifted the laptop bag. Oh yeah, I said. It's nice to see you somewhere other than the subway, Dan. You look good. Healthy. Have we met some? The connection hit me like a thunderbolt. The homeless man, the one who'd looked at me in the eye when he'd started snagging on body parts. The frequent passenger. He looked much better shaved and showered. The man smiled wider. Ah, now you see it. Why are you messing with my life? His smile disappeared. Messing with your life, Dan? I'm saving you, fixing you. Christ, you let the whole world walk over you, then apologize when they get your blood on their boots. That's not true, I mumbled. Sure it is. I've watched you for so long. I'm not homeless. I'm sure you thought that. I'm actually wealthy, Dan. So wealthy that I've gotten bored with my own life. Now my hobby is helping others put their lives right. You caused Jane to dump me, I whispered, and my boss. Jesus, what you did to Henry. Technically, you dumped Jane. Well, me as you, but let's not split hairs. She didn't respect you. As for Henry, that sneering asshole was holding you back. With him gone, your office is going to need to fill that job, right? A promotion would do you good, and boy, do you deserve it. This is crazy. This is all just... I mean, you killed a person. The man chuckled. More than one person, Dan, much more. Come with me. Without waiting to see if I was behind him, my strange visitor walked out of my apartment. Feeling caught in his pull, I followed. The door to my neighbor's apartment was open. The scene inside reminded me of the time I saw a semi-truck run into an elk on the highway. Blood everywhere, soaked into the rug, dripping from the ceiling. What was left of my two neighbors was piled on the couch. The radio was broken in half. Give me 6 months, the small man said. 6 months and I will help you get your life on track. No one will ever walk over you again, I promise. Or I can give you this computer back and you can return to being weak and scared. I thought about it for a long time, staring at the wet, red smears that used to be my obnoxious neighbors. My dad used to beat me with a belt whenever I got anything less than an A in school, I told the stranger. He never apologized. I haven't spoken to him in years. But I still know where he lives. The small man smiled.
I first spotted the solid oak table sitting in the window of this dusty antique shop on the walk home from a soul-crushing marketing interview. I was fresh out of college, broke and drowning in student loans, spending my days hunting for full-time work while barely scraping by on flaky freelance design gigs and a shitty part-time temp job. But when I saw that table, I was obsessed. It felt like the one adult thing I needed to finally make my tiny, empty apartment feel like home. It took 4 months of side hustles, skipping meals for ramen, and keeping my thermostat at a frosty 62 degrees, just to see the balance in my savings account crawl up to the price tag. I visited that shop 3 times before I finally pulled the trigger, and even had to beg off my temp shift that morning just to be there when they dropped it off. The movers arrived around 10. There were 2 guys. The taller one was fine, careful coming through the narrow doorway and asking where I wanted things set up. The other one, shorter and heavy-set with these pale, flat eyes that unsettled me the second he walked in, kept dragging his end of the table instead of lifting it properly. I watched him do it twice and held my tongue, but the third time I heard the sickening scrape, I flipped. I pointed at the jagged gouge along the left side of the tabletop and told him he gotta be careful, or I'll be making him pay for the damage. He looked at me, rolled his eyes, and kept dragging it. I stepped in his way, shouting for him to stop. He just ignored me like I was a fly. 4 months of freezing and eating cheap rice boiled over in my head, and before I knew what I was doing, I slapped him hard. The air in the room changed instantly. He turned toward me, chest puffed out, looking like he was about to flatten me. The taller guy jumped in, physically shoving him toward the door. The short guy was yelling over his shoulder that I was going to regret it, that he knew where I lived now. The tall guy mumbled a quick sorry, grabbed the dolly, and they peeled out of the lot. I double-locked the door, my hand shaking so hard I could barely turn the deadbolt. I stood by my new, damaged table, trying to convince myself it was just big talk. Guys like that are all blusters. By sunset, I'd managed to talk myself down. I had some takeout and a glass of cheap wine, watching a sitcom to drown out the silence. Around 9, the sky opened up. I did a lap of the apartment, checking the locks before I crawled into bed. Maybe an hour later, I woke up to the sound of a massive crash from the front of the house. The power flickered before it died completely. I sat frozen, staring at the sliver of light coming through my cracked bedroom door. Through the gap, I could see the frosted glass panel by the front entrance. There was a shadow there, still as a statue. I blinked to ensure it wasn't a tree branch or a trick of the light, and really the outline of a person. But it stayed. I hurriedly scrambled for my phone, but it had lost signal at some point during the storm. I got up and took the heavy candlestick from the dresser and went to the kitchen and stood with my back against the wall and listened. A few seconds later, the front door creaked open. I knew I'd locked it and used the deadbolt, but those heavy footsteps were in my hallway now. He was whispering my name. My blood ran cold. Without thinking, I bolted through the kitchen and up the back stairs. I locked myself in the bathroom, shoving the heavy wooden laundry hamper against the door and sitting on the edge of the tub, clutching the candlestick like a lifeline. He was at the door in seconds. He gave 3 polite knocks, like he was delivering a package, before the first kick came. The old door frame started to splinter with every hit, and he started shouting at me to come out. Tears started rolling down my face. I couldn't think of a way out. Suddenly, I remembered my smartwatch. My hands were slick with sweat, but I found the emergency SOS button and held it down. By the time the wood finally gave way, I was already halfway out the small bathroom window. The latch sliced into my arm, but I didn't feel the pain until I hit the wet grass 6 feet below. My left ankle buckled with a sickening pop. I somehow scrambled across the yard and found the neighbor's garden shed. It was unlocked. I slipped inside and hid behind a row of rusted metal shelves, pressing my hand over my mouth to stifle my ragged breathing. I could hear him out there. He was circling around. I could hear the sound of boots on wet gravel. At one point, he was right on the other side of the thin metal wall. I could hear his wet, heavy breathing through the siding. I squeezed my eyes, praying for him to hop off. Suddenly, the far-off wail of a siren cut through the thunder, and I heard him take off running. The cops caught him a few blocks away. They told me they found rope, heavy-duty zip ties, and a box cutter in his bag. The officer said I was lucky that I got out alive. I ended up with 8 stitches in my forearm and a sprained ankle that kept me on crutches for over a month. I still have that oak table. I put a big potted fern over the gouge he left. Some days, I think about selling it, but that feels like giving up, so it stays. I don't do deliveries anymore, though. If it won't fit in the back of a friend's truck and I can't haul it up the stairs myself, I don't need it. I've never once complained about the heavy lifting. I'd been hauling furniture for about 2 years. I started right after my folks kicked me out. It was a mind-numbing and tiring gig, but it brought food on the table and kept a roof over my head, so I didn't think about it much. Most people were either invisible or way too chatty. I'd seen 100 living rooms and figured I knew the drill. Until the delivery to Route 49 came. An old lady named Agnes had ordered a custom-made 3-legged table. The address was way out past the edge of town on a country road. Throughout the drive, my GPS kept glitching, but it had happened before on some older routes, so I kept driving. The house was 2 stories, wood construction, and seemed to have been built in the 80s. The porch steps shifted under my boots when I carried the table up. The door opened before I'd even finished knocking. The lady was small and somewhere in her 60s. Her white hair was worn loose around her shoulders, and she was wearing this faded, oversized tunic that looked like it had seen better days. She spotted the table, and her face lit up. She gestured for me to haul it into the parlor. I stepped inside and immediately felt like I'd walked into the wrong century. The room was packed, wall to wall. Clusters of little voodoo dolls were pinned everywhere, mixed in with strings of small animal bones. Someone had drawn weird chalky symbols along the baseboards that didn't look like anything I recognized. Every flat surface was covered in candles. The whole place reeked of stale beeswax and damp earth. I dropped the table exactly where she pointed. She laid her hands flat on the wood, closed her eyes, and gave a slow nod, like the table was talking back to her. She told me it was a planchette table, that she was a medium, and that she used these tables to help people communicate with the dead. I should have just taken my invoice and bounced. I had 2 more stops to make and the sun was already way past noon. But Liam's face dangled in my eyes. It had been nearly a month since the crash took him. We'd been best friends since our sophomore year, and a day hadn't gone by when I hadn't missed him. So I heard myself ask her if she could reach him. She happily agreed. She asked me to light all the candles around us. She set 2 chairs at the table, placed the planchette on the surface between us, and told me to put my fingers on it lightly, and not to take them off regardless of what happened. I watched her close her eyes and start whispering. At first, everything felt completely normal. I was even grimacing inside that I fell for it. Nobody could talk to the dead. But after 5 minutes, the temperature started dropping to the point where I got shivers. Every candle in that room tilted sideways at the same time, but there wasn't a lick of wind. Agnes went completely vacant. Her breathing slowed. Her hands turned white where they gripped the planchette, and her head slumped forward like somebody had cut her strings. I'd nearly got up and booked out of the room when she started giggling. My blood turned to ice. She started rambling incoherently. Before I knew it, Liam was there. He was chanting my name. The voice was unmistakably his, but the words coming out weren't. It was poisonous and angry. He started sobbing, accusing me of being a wuss for a friend. He said I'd watched him die, that I was right there on the shoulder of the road when the car flipped and didn't do anything to save him. I wasn't, though. I was dead to the world in my apartment 3 miles away. The cops verified it. I had the receipt from the diner, but hearing his voice say it crawled doubt in my own skin. Agnes's face started twitching, muscles pulling in directions that weren't meant to go. When her eyes finally snapped open, angry tears rolled down her white pupils. The voice growled and shouted as Agnes convulsed. Things started falling off the shelves. A heavy mason jar shattered against the drywall inches from my ear, showering me in glass. The tables started bucking like a live thing, rattling so hard the planchette went flying across the floor and cracked against the baseboard. All of a sudden, she stood up, drifted upright, and started coming at me. I screamed, kicked my chair over, and scrambled through the hall. I didn't stop until I was locked in the cab of my truck with the engine screaming. I drove for 20 minutes before I realized my hands were shaking too hard to stay in the lane. I had to pull over at a gas station to keep from barfing. A week later, I was scrolling through the news when her face stopped my thumb. Agnes was found dead in that same parlor. The report called it a violent struggle. Towards the end, the table was mentioned. It was found snapped clean in half. The candles had burned circles into the floorboards. I came real close to calling 911 to spill everything, but I stopped. What was I going to tell them? That some creepy table told me I was a killer? They tossed me in a psych ward before I even got to an interrogation room. But whenever I close my eyes now, I still see those eyes and feel the burn of those jars shattering. I can still hear Liam, too, calling me a shitty friend. I find myself replaying the whole night over and over. I check the clock on my stove, the time-stamped texts from that night when I was home. I know I was. But then, why's Liam's angry voice silencing my truth? My mom and Uncle Carlisle hadn't talked in forever before she rang him up in the spring of 2019. I wasn't really sure what they talked about, and honestly, I didn't ask. The fact that she was even reaching out to him meant things at home were really bad. My dad had gotten himself into some legal mess that I'm not going to dive into here, and she needed a place to stash me for the summer. With all her other siblings already on vacation, Uncle Carlisle was her only option. When he actually said yes, she was caught so off guard she kept bringing it up the whole drive to the airport while she gave me the lowdown on the guy. Ever since he was a kid, Uncle Carlisle wanted to be some big-shot scientist, but he couldn't really cut it in school. So he ended up turning his place into a DIY laboratory to keep doing his own thing. She told me he was a bit eccentric, but totally harmless. He picked me up in a truck that smelled like a mix of bleach and stale coffee. He was thinner than I pictured, with these yellowed stained fingers and glasses that sat all crooked on his nose. The second I buckled my seatbelt, he started rattling off the house rules. I had to cook for myself, do my own laundry, and handle the dishes. All of his lab gear was strictly off limits, and I wasn't allowed to have anyone over. He made sure to tell me twice not to touch anything in that lab. I didn't really know what to say, so I just kept nodding. He lived out in rural Wisconsin in a ramshackled mansion. The house was 3 stories tall, with paint peeling off and long, ugly strips. When I stepped inside, the pungent smell nearly knocked me over. The lab took up most of the first floor. It was lined wall to wall with glass jars. Organs, specimens, and a bunch of other stuff were floating in yellow fluid. Without a second's delay, he showed me my room on the 2nd floor, and I locked myself right up. My mom called twice, asking how I was doing, and I told her I needed out ASAP. She told me she was making arrangements and would come get me the moment something worked out. The big crate showed up on the 3rd day, on a rainy Saturday afternoon. 2 guys lugged it up. It was almost as big as a wardrobe and had a heavy combination lock on the latch. Uncle Carlyle was at the door before they even knocked and wouldn't even let them pass the porch. When I asked if he'd needed my help, he gave me a stink eye, grabbed one end himself, and dragged it inside alone. Once inside, he kept admiring the crate, as if he'd been waiting his whole life for whatever was in that box. He strictly told me not to touch it and disappeared down the hall. I kept staring at the crate, dying to know what was in there, but I knew better than to mess with his stuff. By dinner, I'd pretty much forgotten the whole thing. The night, I was having a Skype call with Joe, my best bud, when suddenly a loud thumping started echoing from right below my room. Figuring it could be the old pipes or something, I went to check and followed the noise. I ended up right outside the lab. I peeped through the crack. The noise was coming from the crate. I was about to creep when footsteps echoed down the hall, and I ran back to my room. On the 4th night, I woke up to a high-pitched laughter coming from downstairs. I lay there for a bit, debating whether I should go or leave it be. The crate definitely held something weird, and curiosity was killing me. So I went to the landing and peeped into the lab. Uncle Carlyle was down there, darting between his machines, touching things, muttering, circling, and laughing to himself. His eyes were bright and excited. He looked up, saw me, and told me to come down. He said I had to see it. He'd actually done it. I asked him what he meant, and he told me he'd found a way to wake the dead. My eyes widened, and heart started hammering, but I could blink. The banging started inside that crate again. In seconds, it started shaking across the concrete floor. The overhead bulbs started popping out one by one. Shelves rattled, jars fell and shattered on the floor, and a rotting smell spread. Suddenly, from the 2nd floor hallway right above me, I heard the wailing of children. The sound was moving back and forth like they were pacing up there. It got so loud I thought my ears gonna start bleeding. I bolted for the door at the end of the lab. Uncle Carlyle was right behind me. We ran through the hallway. I made it through, but before he could get out, the door slammed shut. I heard the bolt click into place from the inside. Uncle Carlyle was screaming my name. I started pounding on the door and twisting the knob, but it was locked. His voice went up and up, getting higher until it didn't even sound human anymore. There were chants and breaking of glass and sparks from machines. It lasted maybe 2 minutes before everything went dead quiet. I kept knocking on the no, unsure what to do. About half an hour later, a sheriff patrol stopped. They asked me why I was outside in the rain and if I was okay. I sobbed about Uncle Carlyle. The officers went inside while I waited by the driveway. One of them came back out, whispered something to his colleague, and the two headed back in. Nobody told me a thing until we were at the station. Uncle Carlyle was dead on the lab floor. Someone had ripped his eyes off his sockets and left him to bleed. The crate was still locked, and they had to cut through the latch to open it. Inside was the mummified body. It was really old and tiny, but was perfectly preserved. Uncle Carlyle had illegally bought to conduct a science experiment. The mummy was in the same state it was brought, except its eyes were now filled with a pair of fresh human eyes, as if it had been recently stitched there. The investigation lasted about 2 years, but I stopped following it because Mom asked me not to. She said I'd already seen enough, and I couldn't agree more. We eventually got back to our normal lives, but there hadn't been a night since when I hadn't relived the evening, heard his shrills for help, or heard the rumble of the crate in my sleep. Fred and I started the job at Miller Security Solutions on the same Monday and instantly bonded over our mutual hatred for our manager, Rob, in the very first week. The place was a grinder, and Rob was a nightmare. He'd make us spend our nights pulling Cat6 cabling through crawl spaces and mounting cameras for barely enough cash to keep the lights on. But both of us were pretty desperate, so we endured. The first month was hell. Rob was the usual blowhard who loved the sound of his own voice. He'd hover over our shoulders, nitpicking every misaligned camera angle or bad cable management. We were just the new guys, trying to keep our heads down and stay invisible, hoping he'd eventually find someone else to torment. But he didn't. If anything, he started acting like a straight-up jerk. He'd call us demeaning names, belittle us in front of customers, and find any excuse to dock our pay. About a month in, we realized he was skimming off the top of every job, quoting customers a premium price and pocketing the difference, but we couldn't do a damn thing about it. He owned 40% of the company, and he had the books cooked so tight they were bulletproof. Beyond the money, the guy was outright cruel. He knew most of his employees couldn't afford to walk out the door and extracted 2 people's labor from one. So, when he mentioned he was taking off for a long weekend to visit his sister in Florida, Fred caught me by the loading dock and pitched the idea. He said we knew the alarm system like the back of our hands. He'd done this kind of thing back when he was living on the streets. He'd promised we'd be in and out, grab enough valuables to even the score, and clear out without a trace. It made me nervous, honestly, but I hated Rob's guts, and the idea of watching him spiral when he realized he'd been hit was too tempting. So, I said yes. We spent the whole afternoon planning the robbery. Breaking into his house took us about 90 seconds. The house was huge, pitch black, and freezing. We swept the main floor with our flashlights, scanning for anything worth grabbing. Fred snagged a watch from the master bedroom, while I cleaned out Rob's wallet collection. After we'd picked the main floor clean, I told Fred it was time to bail. But he said guys like Rob were always loaded and kept their real valuables tucked away somewhere hidden. He wanted to explore a bit longer, so we headed to the basement. It was even darker down there. We swept our flashlights around, but all we saw was a laundry room. Fred was pretty bummed. I told him to let it go. We'd already taken enough. We were just turning to leave when my elbow hit a drying hanger. My flashlight fell, and the beam landed on a doorway back in the corner. My heart did a flip, and Fred froze. That door wasn't on any of the blueprints we'd seen. It was a heavy-duty steel setup with hardware that probably cost more than we made in months. Fred grinned. He said we'd hit a jackpot. It took him about 4 minutes to pick the lock. The door groaned as it swung open, but the second the smell hit, I nearly threw up. Fred was gagging right behind me as well. I pulled my sleeve over my nose, took a breath, and stepped inside. When the light hit the walls, we both went dead still. Soundproofing foam covered every inch of the place, old and stained with dried blood. It was caked on everything, from the floor to the ceiling, like it had been sprayed. Chains were bolted into the concrete, the links were worn smooth, as if someone had been pulling at them for a long time. Suddenly, a little whimper came from the corner. Fred swung the light over, and I screamed. A young girl, about 11 or maybe 12, was chained in the middle of the room on a mattress that was soaked with blood. Her lips were bleeding, and there were finger marks on her neck and face. Her wrists were bruised, and she was sobbing, trying to yank at the chains. Fred made a choke sound and leaned against the wall to steady himself. It took me a good 5 minutes to breathe normally again. I was trembling like a leaf. It took me 3 attempts to dial 911. I gave the address and stayed on the line, while Fred sat down on the floor next to her, talking to her quietly. I don't know what he said. I was stuck staring at the walls while I waited. Every inch of it was covered with photos, chopped off hair, severed fingers, and jewelry of his victims in jars. I couldn't believe I had been breathing around a freaking monster all this time. The cops arrived in 11 minutes. They got the girl out first. She didn't say a thing until they were outside. Before climbing into the ambulance, she mumbled appreciation towards us.
We were detained the same night. They caught Rob 2 days later at his sister's place 4 states away. Fred and I got charged with breaking and entering, but the charges were reduced. We cooperated as much as we could. Just about every employee showed up to testify about what kind of guy he really was. The women talked about the threats and creepy comments. Fred and I got canned, obviously, but both of us are still in the same line of work. I don't really know what else I'd do, but every time I open a door I'm not sure about, that smell hits me before I even see anything. I don't think I could digest how close I'd been to evil all along and how oblivious I had been. I'd been in that house a dozen times. I'd done maintenance, tweaked his cameras, even stood in his kitchen shooting the breeze while he poured me coffee. The whole time, I was walking on top of that basement floor and had no idea what was being buried right beneath my feet. I'd been a professional locksmith for over a decade, so I was used to any reason a person might have for needing their locks changed. Mrs. Devlin's case seemed like another standard job when she called me on a Wednesday morning in August, saying a friend had given her my number. She asked if I could get out there right away. She gave me an address on the edge of town, where the houses are massive, with fountains and never-ending driveways. I told her I was already booked for the day, but she insisted she needed to replace her locks urgently. She even offered to pay double. When I pulled up, she was already watching from the front window and had the door open before I'd even finished walking up the path. She was jumpy while she explained what she needed. She wanted the most unpickable deadbolt I had, and the whole time I was working, she kept peeking out the window at the street. When I finally asked if she had a specific reason to be worried, she opened up a little. She'd gone through a messy divorce recently. Her ex had been harassing her, and while her lawyer was handling it, things were moving way too slowly. I didn't pry for more details. I did my job and told her to check. I'd swapped out the front deadbolt, put on 2 heavy-duty interior chains, and updated all the hardware on the back door. It took me about 3 hours, and she paid me well. When I handed her the new keys, she let out a massive sigh of relief. I told her she was in a much better spot than she'd been by that morning, and I meant it. The locks I put in were top tier, and the install was solid. By the time I got home, Mrs. Devlin had already slipped off my mind. Late that night, I was doing laundry. When I picked up my jacket to throw it in the wash, a key clattered onto the floor. I realized I'd accidentally walked off with a spare. I thought about just mailing it back, but considering her situation, that didn't feel right. I decided I'd drive out there in the morning, return it in person, and apologize for the mix-up. I was back at her place by 8 the next morning. The front door was already cracked open about 4 inches. I stood on the porch and called out her name. Nobody answered. So, I pushed the door open a few inches with the flat of my hand and peered into the hallway. The entryway table was flipped, and the mirror had been knocked off the wall and shattered in the corner. I called out Mrs. Devlin's name and stepped inside. I found her upstairs, sprawled on the landing in a pool of blood. It was horrifying. Someone had smashed a wine bottle over her head and used the jagged neck to finish it. My stomach turned and I backed away, fumbling with my phone to dial 911. I sat on the porch steps, shivering in the morning air until the sirens came. When the cruisers pulled up, the flashing lights seemed too bright for such a quiet street. The detectives took over in seconds. They took me to a van and started drilling me with questions. Where was I last night? Why was I back so early? They listened, but I could tell they were just waiting for a slip-up. They told me the deadbolts I'd installed were completely untouched. There was no sign of forced entry, and to top it off, they found my prints everywhere. I was arrested, charged, and got 11 days in county jail. It's a miserable place. My lawyer kept telling me to hang tight, that he was digging up something to clear me. But it's hard to believe in process when you're staring at concrete walls all day. Finally, they got the breakthrough in pharmacy security footage from across the street. It showed a figure wearing my exact work uniform approaching the house at around 3 a.m. My van was clearly in the frame, parked in her driveway, but I was sure my van was locked in my garage across town, and I was dead asleep at the time. Whoever it was had cloned my keys and even had a replica of my work van. It took them 3 days to track her down. It was Lauren. She'd worked for me 2 years back. We'd had a brief, messy thing, and when I ended it, she didn't take it well. She had a fixation. I'd fired her and hadn't given her a second thought since, but she'd been stalking me all along. When I started seeing this other girl from Hinge, she couldn't take it and came up with this plan to punish me. She'd lifted impressions of my van key, tracked my routes, and memorized my quirks, like how I'd sometimes pocket a spare key out of habit. She'd built the whole scene to frame me, counting on me to come back and discover the body. Lauren received 18 years. Mrs. Devlin's daughter, who flew in from abroad for the trial, apologized while sobbing. I attended the funeral and couldn't come up with the words to offer condolences. I am still a locksmith. Friends tell me to get out of the trade, but quitting feels like letting Lauren win and take something else from me. But the episode has left its mark. I don't move fast anymore. Before I leave any job, I lay out every single key on the passenger seat of my van and count them against the work orders. I haven't cut an extra key since. I still dream about that front door standing ajar, 4 inches. How mundane it looked from the sidewalk. How easy it was to just push it open and walk into my own nightmare. And I haven't slept properly since. As a child, I aspired to be an interior designer. I wanted to help people make their homes look appealing. At 17, I even landed an internship at a custom woodwork shop where we built high-end hotel doors and heavy-duty hardware. About 2 months later, my parents died in a crash, and my entire dream shattered. I needed steady money and ended up drifting into locksmithing through a friend of a friend. It wasn't the plan, but it kept me fed. 9 years later, it remained my profession, but now I was obligated to be on call around the clock. The night hours usually paid better. It was a lazy Saturday night in June. I was half asleep on the couch watching Deadpool. The table clock read 2 a.m. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. It was Mr. Turner. He was a retired professor in his 60s who lived across the street. He'd lost his wife a few years back, and his kids never visited him. People around said his son got busted for dealing, and he'd cut him off from the will. But that wasn't my business. Honestly, he seemed like a regular guy who kept his lawn neat, left his porch light on, and waved when I pulled in after work. But he was usually private, so a call late at night felt off. I picked up and barely even managed to hello before he cut in. He sounded shaken. He said that he was trapped inside his house. The front door mechanism had completely seized up, and he couldn't get the latch to budge. He was scrambling to make an airport run and was starting to panic, so he asked if I could come over and take a look. I told him I'd be right there, grabbed my tools, scanned the street, and headed out. Outside, his place was pitch black. It was the first thing that set me off. Turner always kept the kitchen light on out of habit from when his wife was alive. I crossed the street and called his name from the porch, but the place stayed dead silent. He didn't turn on the lights or respond. I pressed my ear against the door, listening for anything, but only got dead silence. Dreads started crawling up my spine. I was genuinely worried for the person. So, I hurriedly picked the lock. Luckily, it was a standard deadbolt and took me maybe a minute. The second I stepped inside, the temperature hit me in the face. It was weirdly cold, as if the heat hadn't been on for hours. The whole house felt empty. Walking in, I started shouting his name, telling him the lock was fine and he could go pick up whoever he wanted. But he wouldn't reply. I did a quick scan. His reading glasses were sitting on the side table. There was a half-finished glass of water on the kitchen counter, and the TV remote was resting on the armchair. Everything looked like it should, but the house felt oddly hollow. I kept calling his name as I headed for the stairs. The bedroom door was open. Turner was in his chair by the window, back to me. I'd seen him sitting there 1,000 times from my own place. His reading lamp was buzzing away. I called his name again. He answered in a rather timid voice that seemed to be coming from afar. He said he was fine, just embarrassed about the whole thing. Relief washed over me. I told him it was fine. I had taken care of the lock and he could go pick up his guest. He thanked me again and said there was still some time left and that I could leave. He'd lend me the money. I nodded and turned around, but I couldn't shake off the crawling unease. Something just didn't fit right. I sidestepped to catch the angle of the wardrobe mirror and froze. Turner's head was rolled to the side. His mouth was hanging wide open, and his eyes were rolled all the way back in his head. If he had been dead all along, who was talking? My mouth dried up, and my palms turned sweaty. I kept talking, explaining the problem with the lock as I carefully looked around. I spotted a figure behind the bed. He was scrunched down flat against the floor and angled away from the mirror's sightline. He was contorting his whole body, but his jaw was working slowly, throwing his voice right at Turner's chair. I heard myself tell him I'd be off then and see him in the morning. I hurriedly walked down those stairs 2 at a time, stepped out the front door, and pulled it shut. The second the latch clicked, I shoved my tension wrench into the keyway and threw the deadbolt. He hit the door before I was halfway across the street. By the time I made it back to my porch, he was screaming at me, calling me names and promising to make me pay back. I called 911, standing on my porch, watching his shadow pacing behind the frosted glass of the front door. The cops showed up in about 6 minutes. They caught the person, trying to force the back window right before he could scramble out into the alley. The person was a friend of Turner's estranged son. The kid owed him money, probably for drugs, and sent this person to collect. When Turner ordered him to leave, he choked him out, but before he could escape, the deadbolt jammed behind him. He'd actually swiped Turner's phone, which had me saved simply as Locksmith, and called me, hoping I could get him out of there before I realized the old man was dead. The rest of the night was a blur of flashing lights and answering the same questions over and over. I didn't get home until almost dawn, and I sat in my kitchen, unmurdered coffee, waiting for the sun to hit the counters. For days, I couldn't shake off the voice in my head. I couldn't digest being steps away from a murderer who would have killed me in a blink. I'm still a locksmith. I work the same hours and live in the same neighborhood, but I don't pick up unknown numbers after midnight anymore. And now, every time I walk into a room that feels even a little bit off, I inspect the mirrors before I do anything else.
I used to drive a semi-truck years ago, and it was a job that I had for a while. I still drive trucks, but not semis, and it's a completely different schedule for me now. But anyways, probably my scariest memory from driving a semi took place in my last year on the job. It was nighttime, and I was driving on the highway. I don't even remember what state I was in, but it was pretty late at night, and I would be pulling off to get some sleep soon. There were a number of truck stops on this highway, but by now it was getting close to midnight. I knew where I was planning to stop for the night, and it was maybe 30 minutes to an hour up the road. By this point, there were not many other vehicles out at all. As I drove in the right lane, I was going around the speed limit of 70 miles per hour. I remember that a car appeared behind me, went into the left lane, and then passed me. It then went in front of me to the right lane. But after going in front of me, the car then started to slow down a little bit. If I was going 70, this car was probably now going like 68. I realized that I was slowly gaining on him, and I was going the complete same speed on cruise control. This annoyed me slightly as I got closer and closer to the car, because I had not changed my speed, but he slowed down. I was wondering if the car would realize that I was gaining on him and speed up, but it did not. So then I switched lanes to go around him. I sped up, passed the car, and then went back into the right lane when I was by. However, moments later, the car sped up and went into the left lane to get around me. This person must have realized that they had slowed down too much. So very quickly this time, the car passed me going much faster. It went a good ways ahead and then changed lanes when it was pretty far in front of me. I figured this guy was going to go faster this time and not let the same thing occur. At first he was going at a good speed and way up the road, but then I started to slowly gain on him once more. This was really annoying. I was pretty sure that it was all on accident, because why would somebody intentionally do something like this? It was a pretty absent-minded thing to do. When I got like right up to the guy's bumper, after having not changed my speed at all, I had to go around him again. So I did. This must have really made the guy mad. I don't know if he thought that I was trying to race him or if he was trying to play games with me, because he started speeding up when I was in the left lane to pass him. I just said, okay then, and I moved back over to the right when he was in front. Then he did something crazy. He went into the left lane and started slowing down. I was still maintaining the same speed and in the right lane. Then I started to pass him because he slowed down so much, and I didn't know what he was doing. But then he sped up and then cut right in front of me. He left hardly any space. I couldn't just slam on my brakes and stop, so I nearly hit him. He went a little faster, but was driving really close to me. When he did this, I honked at him, as this was seeming to become a road rage incident. I didn't bother to switch lanes. I knew that the truck stop I was planning to go to was coming up just ahead, so I kept driving with the guy right in front of me. He went a little farther ahead, but not by much. Then when we got to the exit, I pulled off at the very last second to the truck stop. I saw the car slam on his brakes, but it was too late and he missed the exit. I didn't know what he was trying to do now, but I was glad to get away from him. So I pulled in and parked my truck for the night. Then I went in the building for a short time before returning to my truck to go to sleep. I got inside, covered my windows, and went to the back area where my bed was. However, not too long after getting back there, I heard the sound of someone banging on my door. It was very loud and persistent. I did not know who that could be. I got up and went over to the door. Before opening it, I looked out. There I saw some random guy. I didn't know who he was, but then I realized that he must be the driver of that car. He started yelling at me to come out and fight him like a man and stuff like that. I told him to go away. I had no interest in fighting that clown. After his yelling and banging on the door persisted, a few other truckers nearby started yelling at the guy because he was being really annoying. He eventually stopped and yelled at me some more, as well as the others who were annoyed with him. Then he stormed off and left. I could not believe it. The whole thing was his fault because he wasn't paying attention. Driving a truck is a lot harder than driving a little measly car like his, but he didn't seem to realize that.
In December one year, my mom, dad, baby sister, and I went to stay with some family who lived up north. It never snowed where I lived, but during our stay, an awesome snowstorm rolled through and dumped several inches on the neighborhood. Our whole family went out to play, make snow angels and snowmen and all that typical stuff, but it soon devolved into a snowball fight between me and my cousin Leo. Within seconds, my baby sister started crying because she almost got hit, so we were ordered to go down the street. I didn't know where it was okay to go, but I just followed Leo's lead. I had a pretty good arm for playing baseball, so he was on the run from me. Eventually, he tried to lose me by ducking into a stand of trees. He weaved through the shrubs and bushes with surprising ease, but I had trouble keeping up. By the time I emerged into the clearing on the other side, I couldn't see him anymore. I froze, suddenly realizing I didn't know where I was and had lost the only person guiding me. I got my bearings and tried not to freak out, thinking Leo still had to be around. I was standing in the front yard of a house, one like any other in that neighborhood. Large, 2-story, big yard with a car out front, though a little worse for wear, and a complete lack of any holiday decorations. When I looked down at my feet, I saw footprints cutting across the yard. They couldn't have been anyone else's but Leo's. I followed his exact path, first making a straight line for the house before curving away from the front porch, hugging the side of the wall and making my way toward the backyard. As I rounded the corner to the back of the house, I expected Leo to be there waiting for me, ready to jump out and scare me or nail me in the face with a snowball. But his trail ended, and nobody was there. I looked all around, not seeing any sign of him. He couldn't have jumped anywhere or been able to cover his tracks so quickly in the perfect blanket of snow over the ground,
so there was only one place he could have gone, inside the house. Now, initially, this wasn't as frightening as it should have been. After all, I didn't know anybody there, but maybe Leo knew the people that lived in that house and hid in there to freak me out. I was standing about 6 feet from the back door, right about where Leo's tracks ended, so I figured that's how he must have gotten in. Hoping this was all still part of our game, I knocked on the back door and shouted, "Come on out, Leo! I know you're in there!" My plan was to turn it around on him and freak him out, but when I heard nothing but silence, my stomach dropped. I started to think I screwed up and banged on some random stranger's door. Then, as the panic was taking over, the door clicked and slowly opened inward, revealing a dark, unlit interior. Hiding behind the door, peeking around the edge, was the bone-thin face of a woman. Her sunken eyes showed as much fear as they did malice, and they petrified me. Inside, I heard whispering from someone else, but it wasn't Leo. It sounded like multiple people. I remember imagining what it looked like in there, and all I could see was a pit of snakes. I stood there, unable to move for maybe 10 seconds, before the woman stepped out from behind the door into clear view.
"Would you like to join us?"
I could barely hear what she was saying because she was completely naked, standing in the bitter cold, looking halfway between dead and alive. Unable to think of a response, I tore my eyes away from the horrible sight of her and stared into the house. There, as my eyes adjusted to the dark, or perhaps as the light shifted, I saw my cousin's face, not 10 feet away. He was inside that house, with all those people, however many there were, whatever they were or weren't wearing, and the look on his face was somehow even more haunting than what I had just seen. Despite not wanting to acknowledge the woman in my field of vision, I saw her scrawny, wrinkly arm reach out to grab me. I panicked and finally ran for my life. I sprinted down the street, almost getting lost on the way back to my cousin's house, but then I found my family and frantically told them what was happening. The adults took me and packed me into the big SUV parked in the driveway. Then I directed them to the house. Before we got there, we ran into Leo. He was walking down the middle of the street, just a block away from the house, still wearing that same shell-shocked expression. However, the car outside and all the people inside were gone. There was nobody to report. The house was vacant. Leo's parents said the bank foreclosed on it nearly a year ago, and it had been sitting on the market ever since. I never had a clue. The for sale sign had been knocked down and buried in the snowfall, and I never got close enough to see the busted lockbox on the front door, which meant the key had been stolen by those freaks. We don't know how long they were living in there, but it couldn't have been that long with their car sitting out front. As for my cousin, he said he was, in fact, waiting behind the house to scare me when the door suddenly opened and he was pulled inside. He was frozen in shock the entire time, but then, after I ran away, the junkies panicked and forgot about him as they fled, so he just walked out. He never wanted to go into detail about anything else. As far as we know, nothing physically happened to him. He wasn't beaten or touched or anything like that, but the things he must have seen in there, I just can't imagine. I mean, I did get a taste of it myself, and it certainly scarred me for life, but Leo's experience must have been so much worse. Honestly, I think I'm better off not knowing the rest. I used to go skiing with my family every year. Those were some of my favorite memories. I told myself that when I became an adult, I would get my own skis and gear, then go on a trip with my friends. By the time I was finally able to fulfill that dream, I was no longer close with my old circle of friends, but I was engaged to my fiancée. To protect her privacy, I'll refer to her simply as Jane, though I assure you there is nothing plain about her. This trip was our secret pre-wedding honeymoon. We both bought brand new skis for it. This time we were old enough to drink. so we had a few before going up the mountain and snuck some shooters in our pockets for when we were on the slopes. It was a wonderful time together, all that we were hoping for and more. After several hours, we decided to take a break at the base of the mountain. As we recuperated, we were approached by another couple. It was very casual at first, just some compliments on our skis, but it turned into small talk, then full-on conversation. They said their names were Adam and Eve, which I pegged as fake names immediately, but the more they talked, the more I understood why they called themselves that. Apparently, they were van lifers, people who live and travel in their van full-time. They seemed like nice people, but they were a bit weird. I'm hesitant to call them hippies, but they did talk about a bunch of spiritual mumbo-jumbo and all the weird things they had done during their travels. Of course, I didn't want to be judgmental, especially when the man, Adam, pulled out a flask and offered us some. I jokingly asked if there was any LSD in it, but he laughed and said it was just vodka. All four of us took a good swig or two, and I could tell by how it was getting lighter that our new friends were indeed drinking it with us. Oh, and it was vodka, that's for sure. Shit tasted like a doctor's appointment. Anyway, we decided to stick together for the rest of the afternoon. Over the course of a few trips up and down the mountain, we tested each other's ability by taking more challenging paths each time. We shared our own drinks and had more of Adam's flask here and there until I was sure the liquor was all out. Then, about an hour before the slopes closed, the woman Eve, as she called herself, revealed an entirely new full flask of her own. By then, we were all tipsy and eager to keep the buzz going. I didn't hesitate to drink it this time, and neither did Jane. However, even through my inebriation, there was a nagging sensation in my hand. The flask really didn't feel like they were drinking out of it, not like the first one, but they had been so nice that I figured they must be strictly pacing themselves. As usual, we tried to get one last trip before we had to leave, still drinking as we rode up the lift a final time. This is about when Adam and Eve invited us to hang out afterwards, in their van, in the parking lot. But Jane and I were clear that we just wanted to get on the road so we could get home before it was too late. I could tell they didn't really appreciate our decision, but at first they didn't push it. Not until we reached the bottom, anyway. Suddenly, I felt 10 times drunker than I should have, and Jane was even worse off. Adam said something about how we must have overestimated the amount we were drinking, but I was sure we were going at a reasonable pace. They told us we were clearly too drunk to drive, so we should hang out with them for a while. I told them straight up, no way. Then I clipped off my skis, as well as Jane's, then carried all four as we started stumbling back to the parking lot. Something about those two was rapidly alarming me, but with each second, my ability to stand my ground against them was draining out of my body. It's hard to explain, but I didn't even feel drunk anymore. My mind was sober, but somehow tiny and unable to pilot my body, which now felt like a giant sack of dead weight. I remember thinking we just have to get to the car, but then I realized we were walking right past it. I tried reaching for it, only to see that I had dropped all our skis and Eve was now carrying them. At this point, my memory is like a slideshow. The next thing I saw was a large van, presumably their van. Then Jane collapsed on the ground. Seconds later, Adam carrying her toward the van. The last image filled whatever was left of my mind with uncontainable rage. The only parts of me I was aware of were screaming, "Don't let them take Jane. If they take her, I might as well die." Then, that was it. Next thing I knew, I was waking up on the same patch of asphalt, freezing my ass off with a pounding pain in my head. I thought I was dead. I thought I'd failed to save Jane, so I kinda wished that was the truth. However, reality was far more bittersweet. When I thought I was valiantly fighting through whatever drug they had given me so I could single-handedly save Jane, I was really just screaming random, unintelligible nonsense.
It was, however, loud enough to alert bystanders, who came to help just in time. I was completely unconscious, though based on their accounts, they managed to take hold of Jane, but they were unable to keep those freaks from getting in their van and escaping with all our brand new, expensive-as-hell skis. Still, I owe those good people everything for keeping them from kidnapping Jane, and also me. Lord knows what sick, terrible things they had planned for us. I'm thankful none of that happened to us, but sadly the police were never able to track that so-called Adam and Eve couple down, and ever since then, our once beloved hobby of skiing just brings back this terrible memory. Last winter, I visited my childhood home during a break from college. The whole town, which isn't much to speak of, was blanketed in snow. I almost crashed my car on the icy roads just getting there, so I didn't plan to go on many outings. Instead, I spent all my time at home. Christmas had passed and we were just waiting for the new year, but I was struggling to sleep after everyone else had gone to bed. I crept out of my room, looking for something to do, yet there was nothing. Outside, the snow was coming down gently, with barely any wind to knock it around. I knew it was freezing cold, but the cabin fever was getting to me, so I stole one of my dad's cigarettes off the kitchen counter and bundled up for a late-night smoke. As I sat in a rocking chair out front, I sparked up and took everything in. My old front yard, the swing set, every stone and every pit, all buried in white. The path would be needing reshoveling in the morning, and no doubt my dad would put me up to it as punishment. For now, it was just me and the near silence, save for the almost imperceptible patter of snowfall and my own breathing. It was a new moon, but the clear country skies bathed my old haunt in starlight, and though it was difficult to find things to miss about home, I had to admit it could be beautiful at times. Even after I finished the cigarette, I coughed and bundled up tighter, wanting to stay out and enjoy it a little longer. But that last drag turned out to be the final sand in the hourglass. My peace was soon disturbed by the distant crack of a branch. Immediately, my ears honed in on the sound. Once was probably just a tree flexing in a gust of wind, but after I heard a second crack, I knew it was an animal. I continued to listen to its bumbling trek through the woods around the house, slowly growing closer. Still, at relative ease, I tried to guess what kind of animal it could be. Whatever it was, it sure as hell wasn't graceful. Perhaps it was a freezing raccoon, a sleepwalking bear, or some other desperate creature. Then, I heard a sound that nearly stopped my heart. The backyard gate opening. It wasn't like a rattling of some dumb animal bumping into it. No, it was the sound of a human opening it with precision. Now, in a full state of alarm, I kept silent, standing up from my chair and sneaking back into the house, locking the front door. If it makes any sense, I could just tell that the air inside hadn't moved since I stepped out, so I was sure nobody in my family had woken up. Whoever opened the gate, they came from outside. I had to see who it was, but I could barely get to my feet to move. My body was telling me I was safer where I was, and it wasn't time to do anything stupid. Still, my family might be in danger if I just cowered, so I forced myself to walk to the back of the house. As I inched my way there, I began to hear a new sound, one a lot more regular than before. A rhythmic scraping, digging in the snow. I began to worry someone was trying to access a partially buried window in the basement, but when I made it to the back door, I saw something quite different. There was a man, covered head to toe in thick black clothing, standing in the backyard, right between the shed and the barren vegetable garden. He had a large shovel and had just begun digging a hole in the snow. Lying beside him on the ground, a white plastic garbage bag. It almost looked like just another lump of snow, but the brightly colored drawstrings gave it away. I didn't have time to wonder what was in the bag. I had to do something.
I was too scared to try and scare him off, so I decided to document him. I pulled out my phone and held down the record button to start a video, but in my haste, I forgot the most crucial thing. I didn't turn off the flash. For merely an instant, the flash blared into existence, reflecting off the glass of the back door and washing out any image I could have gotten. But more importantly, it gave me away. I ducked out of sight, but it was too late. I looked outside and saw the man walking up to the door. I panicked and ran to my parents' room. I woke my dad up and told him to take the shotgun out to the back door, but by the time we got there, the man was gone. He had even covered up the hole he was digging, leaving only a set of footprints that led from the back door and into the woods. He must have walked up to the door and tried to open it, then turned around and escaped while he still had time to cover up what he was doing. Naturally, my dad assumed I was playing a prank on him and scolded me for smelling like tobacco. Then he told me to go to bed. Nobody in my family believed me. Their nearest neighbor was so far away that it didn't make sense from any of them to try and bury something in their backyard, let alone in the middle of a frigid night. I, however, have a theory. Growing up, there was this old creep in town. All the kids suspected him of being some kind of serial killer. It seemed like every week he had a different pet animal with him. Some new car parked in his driveway behind his, but he always insisted he lived alone. No pets, no guests, no family. He never got caught doing anything, but what if they said about him was true? Maybe he's gotten so bold that he started burying the remains of his victims, human or otherwise, under the snow of other people's backyards. Perhaps the point is that when the snow thaws, the grisly, rotting remains are uncovered long after he's gone.
This is something really weird that happened not too long after I got my first job. When I was 17, I got a job at Walmart as a cashier. I was young and I had never had any kind of job experience before, so I didn't really know what I was doing very well. I don't remember a ton from my first shifts, but this happened on what I think was my third or fourth time working there. As a cashier, I would work mostly in the afternoon until sometime at night. So on this night, it was getting later and I would be getting off of work soon. To that point, it had been a pretty average shift as far as my memory goes. Things were a little bit busy earlier, but then it got quieter and quieter the later at night that it got. As I was approaching the end of my shift, I had maybe half an hour left when a coworker approached me. She came up and asked me when I was off, and I told her that I was off pretty soon. She then told me that when I had about 10 minutes left to leave my check lane and go to the back room and pointed over to it. She said that she needed help with something and it wouldn't take long. So I told her okay, and then she left and I stayed at my checkout. I had never seen that woman before, but there were a lot of coworkers at the Walmart that I had never seen, as the stores are always very big. So things were quiet for the rest of my shift. With 10 minutes left, I did what I was told. I turned off the light to my checkout and then I walked to the back of the store. I didn't know what I needed to help with, but I didn't question it. Being new to the job, I was willing to do whatever they asked, even if I was just hired as a cashier. So I went to where I thought I was supposed to go. There were the swinging doors to the back room area, and this was in the back corner of the store kind of. It was quiet over there, and when I got in, it looked like the typical back room. However, I didn't see anyone. I took a few steps in, and then I heard the same woman's voice. She called out my name, but she was way farther down, and I could not see her. I said that I was there, and she told me to go down by her. I honestly could not see the woman at all, but if you've ever been to a Walmart back room, I'm sure some are different, but most of them have boxes everywhere and they have sort of their own little aisles. It was all organized, but not as clearly and presentable as on the sales floor, and there's lots of other random boxes and equipment around. I could tell that she was in the far back, but I couldn't tell exactly where. I started walking and she yelled at me, "Over here." I turned and started going towards her. I made it maybe 20 feet and I still couldn't see her. That's when I heard the door open behind me. The same swinging doors that I had just gone through. I looked back and saw a man there who also worked at Walmart. He too I had never seen before, but he asked me what I was doing. I stopped and I told him that I was asked to help with something back there. He came over to me and he asked me by who. I didn't know the woman's name, and I told him that. He looked confused, and he said that he didn't know who that would be. Then he called out asking who was there. This time, though, there was no response. We walked farther up, and then we heard someone walking away kind of quickly, but they were still out of view. When we made it kind of around the corner a ways up, there was an exit door that was sort of propped open. I remember the guy saying he figured whoever was there had left. He opened the door and looked outside, but didn't see anyone. He then told me that he worked in that area in a department, and he said that they didn't need help with anything. He told me that as a cashier, I probably would not be asked to help with anything back there anyways. So I was told that I could clock out and leave, and he would try to figure out what was going on, and so I left. After that, I never heard anything more about it. I don't know what that woman was up to or who she even was. She probably didn't even work at the Walmart, and looking back, that was really weird. A couple of years ago, I was living by myself in an apartment building. To give you a little bit of background, I'm a woman and had lived in the apartment for almost a year. It was a pretty decent place, as it was only a few years old and for the most part had no problems. At this particular time, I was working an office job on weekdays, and the office was a fairly large building with a few floors and a parking lot. It was close to the city, but it was kind of on its own plot of land, so it was more private. There was a large parking lot in the front, and then the building and grass around it. It had a small private drive that went up to it. So that's the basic background for the story. It really starts when one day I was at work and I left for the day to go home. I typically parked kind of in the corner, and the parking lot would never be completely full, as people were there at all hours. But when I left, I saw there was a guy sitting at a small table that was a ways off in the grass. I had never seen him before, but I really didn't think much of it. I did recognize or know most of the people around the office, because it wasn't that huge and I had been there for a while. There would obviously be some people that I didn't know though, but really I thought nothing of it. However, maybe just a few days later I noticed the guy again, except this time he was sitting in a car that was parked not too far away from mine. Once again, this was when I was leaving. I saw the man look at me and then look away, but I just figured that he worked there now and maybe he was new and that was it. But the next time I saw him is what made me suspicious. I arrived to work early in the morning. I parked in my usual area, and when I got out I was walking to the building and I noticed the guy. He was sitting in a car that was backed into another spot. However, the split second I made eye contact with him, I saw him duck down really fast and go out of view. I didn't know why he would do that. It was like he was trying to hide. This made me stop and continue to watch him because it was really peculiar. After a few seconds, there was nothing. But then he sat up part of the way, saw me again, and then quickly drove away in his car. It was really suspicious. I went inside to work, and I also realized that it was strange for him to be leaving at this hour. There were not too many people that would work all sorts of different hours like that. If I had seen him when I was leaving before, that meant he would probably work more normal hours, so why would he be leaving now early in the morning? That was another strange thing, and I told myself that I would keep an eye out for him going forward. After that though, I didn't see him for a few days. I was starting to forget about the whole thing, but then one day I was arriving back home from somewhere at night. As I got up to my floor, I turned a corner and I happened to see someone leaving their apartment. It was the same guy. He lived just down the hall from me, about 3 or 4 apartments down. I knew that it was him. When I saw him, I quickly turned back and went around the corner, and I don't think that he saw me. I heard him walking down the hallway, and I quickly went down the stairs until I figured he was gone. Then I went back to my apartment. I could not believe that the guy was living in my building, and just a few doors down from me. Did he work at my job actually, or was he stalking me or something? For a few days, I didn't know, and nothing happened. Then I got lucky. Maybe a week later, I was leaving my place one morning, and I heard a door open down the hallway. I looked over, and I saw that it was the same place that one guy lived. My first reaction was to go back inside, but when I looked, I saw that it was not the same guy who was leaving. It was another guy leaving that same apartment. I decided to go ask him who the other guy was. So I walked over and said hi to the guy. I had never seen him before either. But I described the creepy guy to him and asked if he knew who I was talking about. The man said that was his roommate. He told me that he didn't know him that well, but they had been living in the apartment together. However, he told me that his roommate left 3 days ago and he hadn't heard from him or seen him since. He said he hadn't answered any of his texts or calls. I asked him if he knew where the guy worked, and he told me yes, but when he told me the place the guy worked, it was not my company and not anywhere near it. I told the man what happened, and he said that he thought his roommate seemed odd and that he didn't want to live with him anymore. Then we went our separate ways. I never saw either of those guys again. I'm sure someone else moved into that apartment. I still don't know the full story, but it sure seems like that guy was trying to stalk me.
I was 10 years old when my story takes place. My parents took me up to my aunt and uncle's place in the mountains for a nice long weekend. It's this old cabin tucked into a strand of pine trees, miles and miles from any kind of town. The roads out there are gravel, the nights are blackout. If you stood out on that porch after dark, you couldn't see much beyond the first line of the trees. My best friend Tyler came with us, and at the time it sounded awesome. 2 kids, a mountain cabin, a bunch of cousins and no school. Yeah, perfect. It stopped being awesome though the night all the adults went out to dinner. There were probably 8 or 9 of us at the cabin altogether. Most of my cousins were older teenagers at the time. Around sunset, the adults piled into a couple of vehicles and headed into town for dinner, leaving Tyler and me behind with this strict instruction not to answer the door and do not leave the house. Neither of us cared. We already had soda, snacks, and cable television. And for about an hour, that night was perfect. We loved being there by ourselves. And then out of nowhere, we start hearing screaming. Faint at first, a single scream from somewhere out in the darkness. Tyler muted the television. We both kind of looked toward the windows. What was that? I shrugged. Coyote maybe? A few minutes later, we hear it again, this time longer, higher pitched. Maybe human. At least it sounded like it. The hair stood up on the back of my neck. Tyler looked at me. Dude, that's not an animal. I didn't answer him because I still wasn't sure. Then it came again, much closer, a horrible shrieking sound that rose and fell like somebody being hurt. We ran to the kitchen and grabbed the house phone. I called the restaurant and an employee answered, so I asked for my dad by name. He came to the phone a minute or so later. Dad, there's somebody screaming outside the cabin. I could hear laughter in the background of the restaurant.
It's probably just an animal, son.
No, it sounds like a person, a real person.
We'll be home in a bit. Just lock the doors and turn on the floodlights.
He hung up and that was that. Now I'll admit my family was kind of loose when it comes to stuff like this. Everything was always nothing. Things can wait till later. Danger was never even close to any of their minds. We checked every lock in the cabin and then sat back down. 5 minutes later, that same screaming would return. This time it was accompanied by a loud grinding noise. The sound would echo through the woods immediately after the scream. Tyler jumped off the couch. All right, dude, what is this? What is going on? What's that noise? I don't know, man. I don't know. Well, this is freaking me out. The grinding stopped, but the screaming kept up. Something slammed outside, a heavy metal crash. Beyond that, I couldn't place any of the sounds. We ran to the front window and there was nothing, just darkness. The porch light illuminated a small patch of gravel and pine needles. Everything beyond that was just black. Another crash erupted from somewhere near the road. A large bang, and then more of that grinding noise. I grabbed the phone and called the restaurant again, and this time my mom answered. Mom, we're hearing screaming and there's some kind of machine now too.
Son, we're eating dinner.
Mom, I'm serious.
So am I.
Then the line went dead. Tyler looked like he was about to cry. Honestly, I wasn't far behind him. The next hour, those noises continued, sometimes close, sometimes further away. Every few minutes, we'd run to a different window, trying to at least see something, anything. At one point, I saw movement near the mailbox, a figure maybe, but it vanished before I could actually get a good look. The smell would come next, smoke, gasoline, and Tyler smelled it first. All right, dude, what the fuck is going on? I froze. The cabin suddenly smelled like campfire. We sprinted to the front window and an orange light flickered through the trees. It wasn't much of the time, but the flames were growing constantly. Something was now burning near the road. I called the restaurant a third time, and this time nobody answered. I called again, nothing. Again, nothing. Eventually, I finally get somebody to pick up, and I barely get 2 sentences out before they told me to stop calling. My parents had told the employees not to answer our phone number. I remember just standing there, holding the receiver after the line went dead. I was furious and terrified at the same time because whatever is happening outside is not an animal. I think around 10 o'clock the noises finally came to an end. The screaming stopped, the buzzing stopped, everything went totally quiet. Neither Tyler nor I slept much because every creak in the cabin sounded like footsteps, every gust of wind sounded like somebody trying a door. At one point I really thought I heard somebody walking across the porch, but neither of us had any kind of courage to go look. We stayed hidden in our sleeping bags until morning. When I woke up, the sunlight was pouring through the windows, and for a second I thought maybe we imagined everything last night. I walked downstairs, and every adult was gathered around the kitchen table, and nobody was talking. The mood felt accusatory immediately. My aunt looked exhausted, my uncle looked furious. My cousin was crying, crying, weeping. "What happened?" I asked. Everybody looked, but nobody answered right away. Eventually, my uncle stood up, walked to the window, and pointed outside. "Look." I stepped onto the porch and my stomach dropped. The yard looked like a war zone. The mailbox was gone. Splintered pieces were scattered across the ditch. Several trees had deep chainsaw cuts into them. A couple had fallen across the road. The side of my uncle's car looked like somebody had attacked it with an axe. The doors were shredded. The windshield was cracked. Near the road sat this large black burn mark where somebody had piled brush and set it on fire. The scorch mark in grass was still visible. And then I noticed something on the porch. A random pile of dead rodents, squirrels and the like, maybe a dozen of them. All of it read like a message, and I backed away immediately. What happened? My uncle's face hardened, and then, shockingly, one of my cousins answered. My ex-boyfriend. Apparently, the guy had shown up thinking nobody was home. He brought a chainsaw, and when he realized people were still there, at least me and my cousin, he lost his mind. Neighbors later reported that they heard the screaming, the revving the chainsaw, cutting trees, destroying property, setting fires along the road. He got cold feet about the whole thing, though. But the most horrifying part would come next. Our neighbor claimed he'd walked onto the porch several times. Apparently, he'd circled the cabin looking through the windows, looking for people, looking for my cousin. That whole time, we were listening to a violent lunatic tearing apart the property while we sat trapped inside. He could have set the house on fire and we would have been none the wiser. That whining was a small chainsaw that he was using on heavy wood and plastics, even some light metals. If he randomly decided to break a window, we would have been completely alone. There was no cell phones, we had no adults there, nobody to help. Just 2 terrified kids in a cabin deep in the mountains. The guy was arrested eventually, and I don't remember what happened to him after that, but he and my cousin stopped dating, at least. Thank God. My brother and I have computers set up in this converted attic room at the top of the house. Years ago, it belonged to my older sister, but after she graduated and moved out, the bedroom would become ours. She hated sleeping up there. Anytime somebody asked her why, she'd just shrug and say the room was haunted. I didn't believe her, but the room, I will admit, does feel weird sometimes. One night I'm sitting at my computer clicking through a game, and I get that strange feeling again. The one that makes the hair stand up on the back of my neck. I glance over my shoulder and, of course, nobody, just my brother still at his desk. I turn back to my screen to go back to my game. I hear footsteps now, pounding up the staircase. Thump, 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 thump. Somebody running. I stop what I'm doing and look toward the staircase door. The footsteps reach the top and then no more noises, no more thumping. The door doesn't open, nobody knocks, it's just silence. Hey, did you hear that? I ask my brother, and he doesn't even look up. Yep, I did. You gonna check it? No. I laugh. The weird thing is neither of us wants to go because neither of us are bothered. It happens often enough that we just kind of stop talking about it. I guess maybe that was what my sister was talking about the whole time. Some settling walls and floorboards, right? That's all it is. Even though it definitely sounds like somebody is climbing the stairs. Sometimes it'll even feel like somebody's standing right behind your chair. You get this prickly feeling on the back of your neck, like somebody is directly staring at you. You learn to just ignore it. A little while later, my mom appears in the doorway. "I'm gonna run to the store for cigarettes." "All right," I say back. My brother waves without looking away from his monitor, and Mom disappears downstairs. A few seconds later, we hear the garage door rattle and open up beneath us. We hear a car start up and the engine backs out. The garage door closes a minute later and the sound fades down the street. Routine sounds inside our childhood home. My brother slowly turns toward me and says, "Home Alone." I grin back. Finally. The second she's gone, we crank up the music. The speakers are terrible, but they're loud enough to shake the room. My brother starts drumming on the desk with a pencil while I mess around on the computer. For maybe 3 seconds, everything was pretty normal, and then we hear this jingling sound. I freeze, and I guess my brother did too. The sound was coming from the stairwell door. The metal plate on the doorknob has been loose for years. Whenever somebody opens up that door, it rattles, and I'd recognize that sound anywhere. It was a jingle and then a click. The door just swings wide open, and I stare at it. The opening beyond is dark from at least where I'm sitting. Then a voice drifts up the stairs. My mom's voice, clear as day. "Y'all turn that music down." Every muscle in my body locks up. My brother slowly turns to me, and I can tell by his pale face that he heard exactly what I just did. The garage door, the car, her leaving, all of it. Nobody says anything for several seconds. The music just keeps playing. Mom?" I finally managed to say. Nothing. The voice doesn't answer. The music is suffocating. I try to stand up and get some air. "Mom!" Silence. Not a footstep. No movement. Nothing. My brother stands up too, his shirt now sticking to him with sweat. "Don't." I look at him. "Don't what?" "Don't go down there." I try to laugh, but my head is spinning. Am I crazy? What do you mean? What are you talking about? You know what I'm talking about. I do. Mom isn't here. I heard her leave. Still, I end up walking toward the door. The closer I get, the more convinced I become that there's some kind of normal explanation for all of this. Maybe she forgot her purse or a lighter. Either way, I reach the stairwell and there's just darkness leading downstairs. "Mom!" I call one more time. No answer, so I start down. The steps creak beneath my feet, and it freaks me the fuck out. Halfway down, I can already see part of the garage. It's empty, but I keep going. No car, no sign of my mom. I walk to the garage window and look outside. The driveway is empty now too. She's gone, and we are home alone. I move through the house, checking every single room, the kitchen, the living room, the bathroom, all the bedrooms. Everything's empty. The house is dead silent despite somebody just speaking to us moments before. When I finally head back upstairs, my brother is standing right where I left him. His question is obvious. "Well?" I shake my head at him. "She's not here." How the hell is that possible? Dude, I don't know. The music continued playing over our conversation. Nobody wanted to walk over and turn it off. It's annoying, but it also feels like this weird kind of barrier, something to block out any more voices. The rest of the afternoon is pretty miserable. We stay upstairs because we're terrified, and neither of us can relax at all. Every little noise immediately gets our attention, and when my mom finally gets home, we practically run downstairs to meet her. The first thing I ask is, "Did you come back after you left?" She looks confused. "What? Did you come back here after going to the store?" "No." "At all?" "No." "You didn't yell upstairs for us to turn down the music?" The smile disappears from her face. "What are you talking about?" So I tell her everything, every detail. And she stares bullets at me the entire time. She looks at my brother, and something weird streaks across her face during it too. "Did you hear it too?" she asked him. "Yeah, it sounded exactly like you." My mom folds her arms and fear returns back to her face. She says quietly, "Boys, I never came back." Nobody speaks. What bothers me most isn't really what my brother and I heard, it's my mom's reaction. She looked genuinely disturbed. Not totally caught off guard, if that makes sense, like she's already suspecting something about that room itself. Years later, I would ask my sister about it, so she said she isn't surprised at all, and I tell her about hearing Mom's voice and she just nods at me. Then she says something that sent chills immediately straight through me. "That's why I never slept up there, dude." I stare at her. "What are you talking about? What do you mean?" She shrugs. "Sometimes I'd hear Mom calling my name from the stairs." I wait for her to continue, but she doesn't. Finally, I ask, "When Mom wasn't home?" And my sister nods. We don't know what we were hearing, but something had been perfecting our mother's voice for years, and it obviously practiced it on my sister before it got to me. This happened before cell phones, back when being home alone actually meant being alone. If something went wrong, you had the house phone, maybe a neighbor if they were awake, and that was really it. I was 16 or 17 and my parents had gone out for the evening. The house was quiet except for the television playing in the living room. It was one of those ordinary weekends that blur together after enough years pass. Forgettable, I guess, is what I'll call it. I finished a snack in the kitchen, turned off the lights room by room, and got ready for bed. Before heading upstairs, I let our golden retriever Buddy outside for his final bathroom break of the evening. Now, Buddy was the friendliest dog I've ever known. He loved everybody. Neighbors, delivery drivers, even strangers walking down our street. It didn't matter. He'd greet them all with a wagging tail and a goofy grin. In all the years we had him, I never once even heard him growl. Not at people, not at animals, not even when another dog would steal his food. There wasn't a single aggressive bone inside this dog's body, no killer instinct whatsoever. So I let him outside and he trotted down the back porch per usual. Then, out of nowhere, he suddenly stops and I heard a low rumble. At first, I initially thought that another dog had wandered into our yard or something. I quickly would realize the sound was actually coming from Buddy. He stood completely rigid, staring toward the bushes that lined up in the back fence. His hackles were raised, his head was low. I've never seen him like this before. "Buddy," I called out. He didn't respond or react. The growl actually deepened. I stepped to the edge of the porch and looked off into the darkness. The bushes shifted slightly in the wind, but I couldn't see anything unusual. But then after that, Buddy explodes. He lunges forward, barking aggressively, complete and total pure alarm. It wasn't a normal bark either, it sounded really aggressive, like he was trying to keep something away from our house. My stomach immediately tightened up. Maybe it was a raccoon, a stray cat, but that didn't really make sense. Buddy loves cats. He probably wouldn't have invited a burglar inside if one offered him a treat. I'm being totally serious too. The more I stared at those bushes, the more convinced I'd become that somebody was hiding there. The neighborhood was quiet, no passing cars, no other neighbors outside, just Buddy standing guard at the edge of the yard. "Come here, Buddy," I yelled, but he ignored me. I called again, getting the same reaction. For several more minutes, I stood there on the porch trying to convince myself that I was overreacting. The logical part of my brain kept insisting there was probably an animal in those bushes. The other part kept imagining somebody crouched back there watching the house. I looked toward the neighboring yards, hoping to see a porch light click on or maybe somebody taking out the trash, but there was nothing, nobody. Every house around looked like they were already asleep. Meanwhile, Buddy refused to back down. He would bark furiously, stop for a second and listen, and then start growling again. Whatever this was had his full attention, and it didn't seem to be moving much or leaving. Finally, I go back inside and grab the biggest kitchen knife that we owned. Looking back, it was kind of ridiculous, but at the time it felt better than walking into the dark completely empty-handed. When I stepped back onto the porch, Buddy was still there, barking nonstop. I tried calling him once more and still nothing. Then he turned his head and barked directly at me. It wasn't threatening, if that makes sense. If anything, it felt like a warning, like he was telling me to go inside. Looking back now, I should have listened. Instead, I started down those steps. Buddy paced back and forth between me and the bushes, barking and growling. My heart was hammering so hard, I could feel it in my throat. I gripped that knife tightly in my hand. The yard suddenly felt larger than it ever had before, too. Every step I took seemed to be louder than I wanted it to be, and I kept expecting something to burst out of the darkness. As I got closer, I started hearing this faint rustling sound. Plastic. That was all it was. Plastic moving in the wind. And I felt really stupid in the moment. A grocery bag had snagged on one of the branches, was fluttering softly in the darkness. Relief hit me so hard that I almost laughed. There was nobody hiding in the bushes. Buddy was just being an idiot. "Oh my God," I muttered. "Buddy, seriously? It's a plastic bag, man." I stood there for a second or two shaking my head. The whole thing was ridiculous. Here I am standing in the backyard with a kitchen knife because my dog had declared war on litter. But Buddy kept growling. I took another step and the bag lifted. Not from the wind, it rose straight upward. Every bit of relief that was there had now vanished completely. The top of the bag cleared the bushes, then I saw fingers gripping it. And for a second my brain refused to process what I was actually looking at. A hand appeared, then an arm. Then a man slowly stood up from behind the hedge. He'd been shrouded in leaves and shadows. I don't know how long he'd been crouched there for, 5, 10 minutes, an hour? Who knows? All I did know was that he'd been hiding a few feet from my back porch while I was alone inside that house the whole time. He had a black hoodie, black pants. I couldn't make out his face in the darkness. He simply just stood there, holding that stupid grocery bag while Buddy barked like he'd lost his mind. The man looked directly at me and nobody moved. I was frozen. Then Buddy charged the fence, teeth bared. The man sprang into motion. He climbed over the fence in this smooth movement and dropped into the alley behind our property. I backed away so fast I nearly fell onto the porch steps. Buddy was there still, throwing himself against the fence, barking harder than I've ever heard. I watched through the gaps in the fence and the man didn't run. And I guess that really was the creepiest part. He just kind of walked away. He definitely knew the area. Getting caught didn't seem to bother him at all. Halfway down the alley, he glanced back once over his shoulder and I still couldn't see his face. He continued walking until the darkness just swallowed him up. Eventually, I grabbed Buddy by the collar and dragged him inside. The second the door slammed shut, I locked it and every single window in the house and called my parents. The police would come later and search the yard, and they'd find footprints behind the bushes and signs that somebody had indeed climbed the fence, but they never identified who it was or why he'd been there. Nobody in the other neighborhoods had reported seeing anybody. Nobody knew who he was either. For years after this, people laughed when I told them the story because it starts with a golden retriever growling at a grocery bag. I've never laughed because Buddy was not growling at the bag. He was growling at the man that was holding it. I don't remember exactly how old I was when this happened, 5, maybe 6. Back then, whenever my dad came home, he had his own little ritual. Before he even walked through the door, he'd shake his keys. It was never anything musical, just the jingle of a key ring coming through the house. And that sound meant that Dad was home. The second I heard it, I'd run and hide. Usually I'd squeeze between my mom's legs while she was cooking or folding laundry. Then my dad would come inside pretending he couldn't find me. "Where's my kid?" is what he called it. I'd be giggling so hard I'd practically give away my hiding spot. It happened so often that hearing keys almost became automatic for me. That sound meant safety. It meant Dad. The day all this took place, my mom and I were at my grandmother's house. Now, I don't really know why, but my grandmother's place always felt just like strange to me, even as a kid. One of those houses that seemed like it had some kind of history. The rooms were cluttered, the hallways felt narrow, every sound would carry from one end to the other. A lot of my family lived in that house at different times, including my uncle. I think it was around 10 in the morning, and I know that because my dad wasn't supposed to get home until noon. My mom was downstairs doing something in the kitchen while I played nearby. Then I heard it, the keys, clear as day, exactly the way my dad always did it. I jumped up and immediately said, "Dad's home." My mom looked over at me. "What?" "Dad's home." She laughed. "No, baby, he's not home yet." "Yes, he is." "How do you know?" "I can hear him shaking his keys upstairs." I remember the look that she gave me. It wasn't scared, but confused. She wiped her hands off and followed me toward the staircase. I was excited. I thought my dad had gotten off work early. We climbed up the stairs together, and the second we reached the top landing, the sound stopped. It was just silence. I stood there waiting, but there was nothing more. A few seconds later, we hear keys again, but it's downstairs. The exact same sound. I pointed immediately and told my mom, "Dad's downstairs now." My mom's expression had now changed. I don't remember her being frightened just yet, but she was definitely not smiling anymore. We walked back downstairs, and the sound continued, slow and steady, like somebody standing in one spot casually, shaking a ring of keys. I followed it through the house, and my mom followed, and that sound led us toward the bathroom. The door was closed, and I pointed at it. "He's in there." The keys stopped, and my mom froze. Even as a little kid, it freaked me out. One second she's walking, the next second she's just stopped completely. I looked up at her. She was staring at the bathroom door, neither of us saying anything. We stood there for a while before she finally ushered me back toward the living room. Years later, when I brought that story up, she told me something that I'd never known. She said that as she reached for the doorknob, she got chills across her entire body, not normal chills or goosebumps. She described it as the darkest feeling she's ever experienced, like every instinct inside of her was screaming to not open up that door, that if she did, her and I would have been devoured by whatever was making that jingling sound. So in the moment, she didn't open it. She grabbed me and led me outside. We sat on the porch and waited for my dad to get home, my actual dad, the real one, 2 hours later. When he finally arrived, shaking his keys exactly the way he always did, my mom almost starts crying. And at the time, I'm so young, I don't understand any of this. To me, it was just a weird day. As I got older, I convinced myself that I imagined all of it. Kids make things up, memories get mixed together, dreams become stories, and vice versa. By the time I reached my adulthood, I had written most of it off entirely. Then one day, I ended up mentioning it to my mom. I expect her to laugh and tell me I was just dreaming or something to that effect, but she immediately knew exactly what I was talking about, and before I could even finish my story, she was already nodding. "Oh yeah, that actually happened." That's when she disclosed all those extra details, the feeling of doom, the crying. A knot formed in my stomach, and suddenly it wasn't just a childhood memory. It was real, something that we shared between us. She also reminded me of something else that happened in my grandma's house, something I'd forgotten about completely. The funny thing is that me and my grandma both hated the dark, so we'd leave a light on somewhere and talk until we both fell asleep. One night we were both asleep when my uncle came charging up the stairs, not walking, but running full tilt to the house. The sound woke everybody up, and he burst through my grandma's bedroom door and loomed over us. I sat up in bed where he stood, and I don't remember what happened next because my parents rushed in and quickly took me out of the room. The details would come later. According to my mom, my uncle couldn't talk, literally couldn't talk. He stood there pointing toward my grandma's bathroom, eyes wide with terror. His face was pale, and every time somebody asked what's wrong, he just kept pointing. For nearly 2 hours, he was like this. Eventually, my father opened up the bathroom door and looked in and saw nobody there. My grandma eventually began praying over him, and slowly but surely he calmed down. Eventually he could speak again, but never fully explained what happened. Not then, not ever. And to this day, if the subject gets brought up, he shuts down immediately. According to my family, he's refused for decades to say what he saw in that bathroom. He only says the same thing, that he saw something, but never wants to talk about it. My grandma thinks that he chased something through the house and it went up into the bathroom. I personally don't know what happened in that house. Maybe there's some kind of logical explanations for all this. Maybe I was just a kid with a very active imagination. Maybe my uncle experienced some kind of paranoia or panic attack, who knows? Maybe my mom's memory has changed over time just like mine has. I don't know. But what I do know is that I do remember hearing those keys. I remember following those sounds through the house. I remember pointing at a closed bathroom door. And I remember my mom stopping dead in her tracks and refusing to open it up. More than 20 years later, she still says it was the worst feeling she's ever had. It wasn't fear nor anxiety, something else that she couldn't explain. And every time I think about it, I find myself wondering the same thing. If my mom had actually opened up that bathroom door that morning, what the hell would have been standing on the other side? When I was 5, my mom told us David was dead, and that was that. He was my sister's dad, not mine. And even before he vanished, he was more of a rumor than an actual person. He'd gone abroad years and years earlier, got into some kind of accident, and nobody heard from him again. No phone calls, no letters, no nothing. Eventually, word would spread that he had died, and everybody just kind of accepted it. I did too. So when I was 9 or 10, home alone one afternoon, I nearly fell over when I opened up the door and see him standing there. The knock itself was even strange. It was slow and just really weird. Not like somebody visiting, more like somebody trying to remember how knocking worked. I looked through the frosted glass and saw a man's silhouette standing very close to the door. Against my better judgment, I opened it. He looked awful. His hair was greasy and overgrown. Stubble covered most of his face. His clothes hung off him, but it was his eyes that really bothered me. They weren't vacant exactly. They were focused somewhere beyond me, as though he was looking through the house instead of at it. "Is your mom in?" he asked. The voice was rough, slow. I recognized immediately from all the old photographs. "David?" I asked, and he blinked. "I brought the house," he said. I have no idea what that meant. His eyes just drifted past me toward the hallway and the staircase. Then he smiled slightly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Is she 12? he asked. My sister's 12th birthday was a week ago, but this cold feeling would wash through me. He leaned forward slightly and whispered, "Don't let the clock talk." Then I ran. My mom worked across the road and I burst through the door of her workplace almost in tears. "David's at the house." She frowned, looking at me. "What?" "David's at the front door." For a second, she looked annoyed. "No," she said. "David's dead." I shook my head at her. "No, Mom, he's there." Something in my face and demeanor must have convinced her because she immediately stood up and followed me outside. We hurried across the road together and there was David still standing there. He hadn't moved. He was facing the frosted glass of the front door, head tilted as though he was listening to something inside. My mom stopped cold. "David?" He turned around and the look on his face changed several times in just a few seconds. Recognition, confusion, happiness, and back to nothing. "Mary?" is what he said, but that wasn't my mom's name. She ended up bringing him inside anyway, and looking back now, that's probably not what would have happened today. Somebody would have called an ambulance or social services. Back then, people just kind of dealt with things. David sat at our kitchen table while my mom made tea and tried to figure out what had happened to him. Getting answers from him was seemingly impossible. Sometimes he knew my sister's name, sometimes he didn't. Sometimes he just stared at the wall for several minutes without even speaking. The only thing that ever made sense was when he tapped the side of his head and said, "The car went sideways." And that was it. Later, we learned he'd been in a serious car accident abroad and suffered a traumatic brain injury, but nobody knew how severe it was. Nobody knew who had looked after him. Nobody even knew how he'd gotten home. When my sister arrived later that day, he stared at her for a really long time until she became uncomfortable. "You've gotten big," he said. Then, a few minutes later, he asked who she was. That night, he slept in our sitting room. None of us really slept particularly well, knowing he was under the same roof, and I remember hearing him pacing downstairs long after everybody had gone to bed. Slow footsteps back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. The next morning, strange things kept turning up. Our wall clock had disappeared. Random. After searching the house, we found it carefully wrapped in towels and hidden away in a cupboard. Nobody knew why. On our kitchen table sat this brass eagle ornament and a card that read, "Welcome to your new home." It was addressed to my sister. We'd lived in that same house for years now. At the time, none of it made sense, but later we wondered if some damaged part of his mind knew her birthday was approaching and he was trying to do something kind. Maybe he remembered she existed but couldn't remember why. Maybe he knew he needed to be somewhere but couldn't remember where. Whatever was happening inside his head, it was heartbreaking and unsettling at the same time. The next morning, he left. Nobody saw him go. My mom was in the kitchen when she looked outside and he was already halfway down the road and he never even looked back. We never saw David again either. More than 20 years have passed now since that single night. I guess a few years ago, my mom ran into David's sister while shopping and she mentioned his visit to our house, and his sister casually told her that they'd experienced something very similar. Apparently, he'd appeared at their place around the same time, confused and disoriented, then quickly vanished again. And that was the last time anybody's heard from him or of him. I've searched online for him over the years, but there's not really anything there. No trace and no answers. I guess the strangest part to me is that he didn't really feel dangerous. He felt more lost. Completely just hopelessly lost. Like a man wandering through fragments of memories that no longer connected properly. Looking back, I suspect the news of his accident somehow became distorted through word of mouth until people believed that he actually died. Without identification and unable to explain who he was, he may have slipped through the cracks entirely. I still think about him sometimes, about the knock on the door, the way he stood outside listening to the house, about him asking if my sister was 12, and about the clock. Parts of me know what I experienced that day, and it's still totally surreal. But there's another part of me that can't help but wonder if I didn't open up that door to a ghost that odd afternoon.